Greetings, one and all, to the most cursed, most cringiest corner of the internet. A YouTube channel content creator, actively alienating everyone, in both the analog and digital world. Well, welcome and good evening, you wonderful dice of all alignments. I am Lunar D8. This is Let's Play Umineko. It seems the weather will be like this all day tomorrow after all. Dang. This makes the good weather we had earlier feel like a lie. George, Nikki, and I were killing time in front of the parlor television. At that point, Jessica returned. Her face was still blank, but it looked like she'd calmed down a little since we'd last seen her. Is Maria still in front of the portrait? Nope. She just came back and she's sleeping over there on the sofa. It's getting pretty late for her, after all. Looking at the clock, I saw it was a little past 10 p.m. Even if we were planning to stay up all night, it was about time to head back to our room. Well, my mom did have a room prepared for us in the mansion. What'll we do? I'd rather head back to the guest house. Going by what we saw of our parents, I think it'd be better if we weren't in the mansion. I agree. Feels like they're telling us kids to mind our own business and stay out of their way. Let's be good little boys and girls and do that. As we were talking about this, Aunt Rosa came into the parlor. She was looking all over restlessly, probably trying to find Maria. Aunt Rosa, if you're looking for Maria, she's over there on the sofa. Thank you. My, she's out cold. We must move her to a bed. If you'd like, I'll carry her over to a bed. Thanks. That would be wonderful. Are you all heading back to the guest house? Or are you going to stay in the room Natsui-ni-san had prepared here? We were just talking about that. We just decided to head over to the guest house. I see. Then could I ask you to take Maria with you? I'd feel much more reassured if she stays with all of you cousins. Behind those words she seemed to be concealing some regret that the adults, herself included, had deeply hurt Maria's feelings. Leave it to us, Aunt Rosa. After all, we do have an expert at comforting Maria with us. Are you talking about me? I couldn't do it myself. We'll need everyone together. That's right. Battler? Weren't you the one who hit it off of Maria when you were messing around earlier? As we said this, Aunt Rosa smiled, looking truly happy. Thank you, everyone. It looks like our meeting will last until very late. So while I'm sorry to burden you like this, I'll be counting on you all to take care of Maria. Hey, Maria, are you sound asleep? We're going back to the guest house. Maria muttered something indistinct, rolled over, and fell back asleep. It looked like she was sleeping deeply. She's really out cold. I'd hate to wake her. Right, I'll carry her. Maria's body was much lighter than it looked. I lifted her up and put her on George and Niki's back. It was raining hard outside, and Niki couldn't hold an umbrella and carry Maria at the same time. It looked like Aunt Rosa would come with us as far as the guest house to help out. However, when she heard Uncle Krause's voice call out to her, she had no choice but to return. Now that's a problem. I have to go back now. Is everyone returning to the guest house? After we left the hall, on the way to the entrance, the door to the servant room opened and Shan stepped out. It has grown very dark, so allow me to guide you. That would be great, Shan. George-kun is going to carry Maria there. Could you hold an umbrella for him? Yes, certainly. Shan brought umbrellas for each of us and a flashlight to guide the way. As we opened the front door, the downpour was quite terrific. It looked like we wouldn't have any spare time to take a pleasant walk and enjoy the nighttime rose garden. Aniki, is she too heavy? Want me to carry her? It's okay. I can at least carry Maria-chan. I'm truly grateful. Please take care of Maria. Sure, you got it. Then I guess this is good night, Aunt Rosa. Then I will see them over there and return here. Yes, please. Aunt Rosa watched us leave. Maria, I'm sorry for everything. Rosa's mumbling voice didn't reach the person in question, nor any of the kids, but disappeared beneath the sound of the rain. After cutting through the rainy rose garden, we arrived at the guest house. If only I had applied for the position of Maria carrier, then I would have gotten a chance to have Shannon Chan's huge boobs running all over my arm. That's not why I did it, it's a misunderstanding. I thought that if I didn't walk like this, George-sama would get all wet. Come on, quit babbling and go in. After being urged on by Jessica, we folded up our umbrellas and went to the guest house. Has anyone gotten their clothes wet? I can bring some towels if you want. You don't need to worry about us that much. Thanks, Shannon-chan. That's right. We were planning to play cards or something. Would you care to join us for a bit? Huh? Who had the night shift on today's schedule? I believe we had a special schedule during the family conference. Also, I think a few alterations have been made, so I will go and check. Wait, if you have to go all the way back to the mansion to find out, don't force yourself. Oh, that's all right. I can find out from the servant room in the guest house. Please excuse me for a short while. Shannon-chan gave a quick bow and went into the guest house servant room. The rest of us headed for the cousin room and decided to put Maria to bed for the time being. Maria was sleeping very deeply, and there was absolutely no sign of her eyes opening. For now, we'd get some soft drinks out of the room's refrigerator and drink those while playing cards or something. Oh, Cannon-kun? And you're here too, Genji-sama. What has happened with tonight's shift? Kraus-sama has given an order. He made some sizable changes to the shift schedule. Indeed. Goda-san now has the night shift at the mansion. Shannon and Cannon have the night shift in the guest house. Kumasawa-san and I have been ordered to sleep in the guest house. Just now a phone call came saying that once you arrived, you were also to remain here for the rest of the night. Huh? That certainly is a sizable change. The shifts at the guest house and the mansion have been completely reversed, haven't they? Originally, Shannon and Cannon had been assigned the night shift in the mansion, while the night shift in the guest house, where all the relatives were staying, had been assigned to Goda, who had an abundance of experience in entertaining. Kumasawa should have been sleeping at the guest house, while Genji should have been sleeping in the mansion. However, it seemed that Kraus had suddenly ordered that the schedule be modified. The shifts at the guest house and the mansion had all been reversed, and Genji was spending the night in the guest house. It's probably because of Beatrice-sama's letter. Why? Probably? After such a mysterious letter appeared, it was only natural that Kraus-sama would suspect one of us. We served directly under the master, so Kraus-sama tried as best as he could to keep us far away from the family conference. Genji, Shannon, and Cannon were all permitted to wear the ushiromiya family crest, the one-winged eagle, as the servants who served directly under Kinzo. Of course, since they were working for the ushiromiya family, they had to obey anyone's orders, but their only boss was Kinzo. Since only Kinzo held the right to employ them, even Kraus could not have them dismissed of his own accord. Because of this, Kraus and the others often viewed these servants as Kinzo's underlings and shunned them. And in fact, Kinzo seldom let anyone other than them enter his study. This sudden shift was probably a clear expression of the sense of mistrust that had caused. Considering the time Kinzo had left to live, this would definitely be the last family conference before the problem of the inheritance came up. On top of that, the mysterious letter that claimed to be from Beatrice had dropped in out of the blue. Kraus definitely wanted to keep Kinzo's loyal subjects away from the table of such delicate and important discussion. If you would excuse me, I will go rest. If anything happens, call me immediately. Our guest tonight is a special case, after all. Yes, certainly, Genji-sama. Genji nodded back and went behind a screen, took off his jacket, and slowly began to relax after a day's worth of tension. Excuse me, I had to burp. The ones who just returned now, were they the children? Yes. The other relatives are having a conference in the mansion. It looked like it would drag on for quite some time. Then we've got it easy. It's already this late and there's this weather. The rest of the relatives will probably spend the night in the rooms in the mansion. Yes, probably. I'm only saying this because Genji-sama isn't around, but I'm a little happy I was sent to the guest house, I guess. Oh? Why is that? Because you can stay away from Madame and Eba-sama, those bullies? Or do you have another reason? It's not as though I have another reason. I see. Then let's do our best together with our night shift. I'm counting on you, Nissan. Just now I was asked to go to the children's room and play with them. Shannon hung her head apologetically, gazing at Cannon uncertainly. Cannon didn't try to meet her eyes, and spoke curtly as he sighed. It looked like he didn't plan on indulging his sister. You can't. You were assigned to the night shift, besides which it isn't necessary for furniture like us to respond to an invitation to play. You understand, right? Yes, I do understand. Shannon's shoulders drooped slightly. She had already expected that Cannon, a stickler for rules, would say something like that. But she still seemed a little discouraged. As Cannon flipped through a logbook, he spoke, without facing Shannon. That means the children will be waiting for you. You'll have to apologize, and tell them you have the night shift and won't be able to stay with them. Go, and come back. Huh? Yes. I'll go apologize and come back. Shannon hurriedly stood from her seat before her brother's mood could change, and flew out of the servants' room after giving a quick bow. As he watched her go, Cannon took a single deep breath. Genji's voice came from beyond the screen. Cannon, I will be here so you can go too. Genji-sama? Shannon was the only one called. It's not as though I was invited. That is only because you were not there at the time. If you had been, you would have been invited as well. It is good to play as a child from time to time. No such a thing is not necessary for me. Human children may have a need to play, but we are furniture. Is that so? Nason is also furniture. Even if she pretends to be a person, it will only hurt her later. I understand that, so I try not to get too close to people, that's all. Genji did not say anything after that. After a while he stood up and used a pot of hot water to make powdered cocoa, serving some to Cannon as well. Is that for real? I had no clue. Dumbass, you're too loud. You'll wake up Maria. Battler was so surprised that he yelled obnoxiously and scattered his cards everywhere. His voice caused Maria to turn over once, but she soon fell back into a deep sleep. Jessica gave him a jab, and he lowered his voice. Still, seriously, now that you mention it, they really did have that kind of atmosphere, didn't they? Ha, now I see. So George Nikki is... George couldn't be seen anywhere in the room. A short while ago, when Shannon came to the room, George suddenly said that he'd forgotten something in the mansion and needed to go back and get it. Shannon said she would guide him, just like she had on the way to the guest house, and the two of them departed together. Well, there's actually been signs of it for a while now. You know, questions about hobbies and favorite things. I always thought it was a bit much for a passing interest, and look what's happened now. Come to think of it, I get the feeling George Niki's always been overly nice to Shannon-chan. Now I get it. According to the weather report, it looks like it'll be at its worst tonight. It also seems it'll last all day tomorrow, though it should get a little bit better. Really? Then maybe the boat won't arrive until the day after tomorrow. I hope that doesn't interfere with your work on Monday. Haha, I already knew that the typhoon would be coming beforehand. Just in case, I made sure I didn't have any plans for Monday, so it's okay. I may not look it, but I really am the type who can plan ahead in his schedule. George puffed out his chest, acting proud. Compared to the calm appearance George always had as the oldest cousin, he now looked amusingly like a little kid. Shannon chuckled at this abrupt contrast. It's no surprise you're so well prepared as someone who will bring prosperity to his company someday. Well, making a company prosper really is a tough job. Money isn't the only thing that's important. I learned that well when studying under my father. Making a company prosper is like owning a castle and leading your subordinates. My dad really loves reading about great leaders during the warring periods of Japan, a hobby that's probably influenced by the fact that he shares Toyotomi Hideyoshi's name. Much of his philosophy on managing businesses comes from talking about them. Did you know Takeda Shinjin, who was feared as the leader of the strongest cavalry corps in the warring periods, started out with his troops in complete disarray and didn't have the kind of strong leadership necessary to utilize them well? Is that true? That's a little unexpected. In order to unite his troops, Shinjin showed his excellent leadership in many ways. For example, when a soldier succeeded well in battle, he would immediately honor them with a medal. Normally, that kind of thing was put off until after the war, and they were all awarded at once. He continued this diligently while on the field of battle, and immediately showing his appreciation for his troops' military exploits motivated them in an extremely significant fashion. Also, whenever one of his troops was brought down by an illness, he would be the first to rush up to them and care for them, and so on. Takeda Shinjin wasn't just the man who led the strongest cavalry corps in the warring period. He was the person who cared the most for his troops throughout that era. It's said Teddy Roosevelt was probably one of the best people to serve under in a war, because where many commanding officers would command you to charge ahead in the battle, he always wanted to be the first one to battle. So he'd be in front of his troops and he'd basically yell, "Follow me!" and just... And because he was that kind of person, all of his troops went along with him. The truth was, Shannon had already heard this story several years ago, but whenever a discussion of his father led to this sort of topic, George would always glow and look like he was having a great time. So Shannon just smiled without interrupting, urging him to continue. Of course, in a capitalist world, money determines both your strength and the height of your fortifications. But you can't build up a castle or succeed in war by yourself. Such things can only be accomplished with the support of many subordinates by borrowing their strength. After understanding this, when I look at my father's back, I realize how immature I am. I can clearly see how much competition he had to overcome before building up all he has now. George-sama, you truly look up to your father. I am jealous. Ah, sorry, that's not how I meant it. I am sorry, that's not how I meant it either. The two of them awkwardly looked at their feet. Shannon had no parents. She had been brought up in an orphanage owned by Kinzo called the Fukuen House. Under the guidance of Kinzo, their honorary director, the orphanage offered members who excelled a chance for the on-the-job serving experience. If their efforts met with Kinzo's approval, they'd be able to leave the orphanage and work as servants for the Ushiromiya family. This was considered to be the highest honor for those who lived in the orphanage. Servants from the Fukuen house all took names of the character On in them while they served. So Shannon wasn't her real name. The same went for Cannon. All of the members of the Fukuen house were orphans. At least they were all people who had been separated from their parents under special circumstances. Because of this, the orphans had been taught to think of each other as their only family. That's why it seemed so natural for both of them when Cannon called Shannon his sister. And while both Shannon and Cannon were working in the mansion today, there were several other servants possessing the On character in their names, such as Manon and Lennon, who often worked in a rotation schedule. However, there were not many servants who stayed with the Ushiromiya family for long. It was standard for them to quit after 3 years, so you could probably say that Shannon, who had been working for 10 years, was a notable exception to the rule. Working as a servant for the Ushiromiya family was a heavy burden to bear, but the pay wasn't bad at all. Working for a full 3 years would earn more than what was needed to enter the mainstream society. That was why, even though the orphans realized what a harsh task working for the Ushiromiya family was, they still hoped to be accepted. Maybe the fact that Shannon managed to continue working for 10 years wasn't because she had more willpower than the other servants. Maybe she'd gotten stuck working for 10 years because she didn't have the courage to say that she wanted to quit. Kinzo couldn't even trust his own blood relatives, and these excellent servants sent from the Fukuen house were the only ones he could rely on. Because of that, Kinzo would sometimes allow them to wear the family crest as servants under his direct control and have them work close to him. You've been working here for almost 10 years now, right? You must have saved up a lot of money by now. I wonder. It's not like there's anything in particular I'd like to buy. After all, a few million yen isn't enough to live off of for the rest of your life. So, the reason you've been working all this time wasn't to hit some target sum. Yes, that's right. I have nowhere to go outside this mansion. And I have been getting along well with my lady and the other young servants, and Madame does scold me sometimes, but caring for the roses and cleaning the mansion is fun. But that can't be your entire life, Shannon-chan. No, Sayo-chan. Shannon cast her eyes downwards when she heard her real name. She understood what George was trying to say and fell silent. There's something I've learned as I continue to study, even after becoming an adult and a full-fledged member of society. A human's life is not as monotonous or short as we thought when we were kids. All school-aged kids have certain fears they can't shake. They wonder whether they'll live for the rest of their lives like sleepy classes after a monotonous and boring school day, spending their time in a carefree laziness without anything interesting happening until it's all over. However, life's only like that for underage students. Compared to a human's life, the time they spend as students is nothing more than a blink of the eye, a period where they break through the shells of their immaturity. The inside of the shell might be a hot, suffocating, and boring world, but the world beyond that shell is vast and filled with limitless possibilities. So far, your life has been trapped inside the shell called Shannon. I think you're under the mistaken impression that your life will continue like this forever. That's... Shannon couldn't deny those words. She'd been unable to harbor any clear doubts about her lifestyle, and since she never had any hopes or goals for changing herself, she'd lazily continued living the way she always had, and if asked whether this life was satisfying, she wouldn't have been able to nod. She may have been intentionally averting her eyes from the truth. Without George's admonishments, she would have continued pretending not to notice as her real life slipped away, bit by bit, and neglected. George-sama, is it wrong for me to continue living this way? Yeah, it is. Oh, and by the way, didn't you break one of our rules just now? George immediately gave a strict answer, then broke out into a mischievous smile. Shannon already knew what she was being chided for, and she hung her head again, apparently embarrassed. Didn't you promise not to use Sama when the two of us are alone? I couldn't obey that as a promise, but if it was an order, I would have to obey it, because I'm furniture. Then it's an order. Yes, certainly, George-san. As Shannon hung her head, her face red, she said George's name again, this time following with a san. Yes, that's fine, Sayo-chan. George smiled at Shannon, no Sayo, to praise her small act of bravery. This short exchange alone made it clear how far back their relationship must have stretched. For a long while, the two talked as if the weather raging about them didn't even enter their thoughts. They talked about the many memories they'd built during their relationship that no one else knew about. Every once in a while, a flash of lightning would attempt to interrupt them, but this could sully neither the roses nor the time they spent blushing at each other. That's right. I have something I wanted to show you. What could it be? George, who had been speaking eloquently, suddenly started to stutter. Watching him, Shannon seemed to guess something. George timidly searched through his pocket. Something got caught in the depths of his pocket, and just like the stuttering George, it took a while to get it out. It was a very small box. A small box covered in a deep blue velvet. That peculiar shape was enough to tell anyone what was resting inside. Shannon had prepared her heart somewhat certain beforehand that this was what he'd been planning. But even so, when she actually saw it, she couldn't avoid blushing once more. George opened the small box, took something out, and held it out for Shannon to take. I want you to take this. I couldn't accept something so valuable. You can't take it. No, I'm unworthy of such a thing. Sayo? This isn't a request. It's an order. Take this ring. Okay? If it's an order, I cannot disobey. Yep, that's right. Well done. Shannon, not wanting to show her bright red face, timidly accepted the ring from George's hand while she was still staring at the ground. That ring wasn't a simple accessory. It was a noble object meant, since ancient times, to be offered to a special woman under special circumstances. Therefore, while George could order her to take it, he could not order anything beyond that. Anything beyond that would depend not on an order but on Shannon's and Sayo's own will. So from here on, I'm not ordering you anymore. Sayo, I want you to give me your answer by tomorrow without using words. Do you understand? How should I? I won't order you any further, so this isn't an order. But a ring is something you put on your finger, after all. If you like it, you can just put it on any finger you choose. Shannon had only pretended not to know. She already understood what he wanted her to do, but she was standing at a huge crossroads of her life. Look how late it's gotten. Let's call it a day. George turned away from Shannon, acting just a bit bluntly. I could probably order you to wear it on your left hand. You might be timid and independent enough to actually obey that kind of order, but I want at least this last step to be done by your own will, Sayo. Understand? Yes. So that's my order. I want you to think about it well tonight and show me your answer tomorrow. Shannon nodded back. Today was the culmination of their many days spent together. This moment certainly hadn't come as a surprise to Shannon. We should be getting back to the guest house soon. If we take any longer, we'll make everyone worry about us. Oh, I'm sorry, I just remembered something I had to do in the mansion, so, I have to go back to the mansion. At a time like this? Is that true? George stared into Shannon's face as he laughed mischievously. He definitely saw through Shannon's lie. However, when he saw how she felt, he could sort of understand that she might be so embarrassed that she'd want to be alone. So because George realized the meaning behind Shannon's lie, he accepted it. Shannon entered the entrance hall to the mansion with a tottering gait. A mixture of exaltation and uncertainty gave her a feeling that she couldn't easily describe. It swelled up in her chest until it felt like she was about to burst. After stopping for a second in front of the servant room to take a deep breath and calm her heart, she opened the door. Inside, Goda, who had been ordered to take the midnight shift to the mansion tonight, was absorbed in a worn-out crossword puzzle magazine. He looked up for an instant to see if one of the family had come, but when he realized it was a fellow servant, he returned to his puzzle as if nothing had happened. Genji-sama told me to come and help you. Ah, is that so? That's a relief. I was just about to go check that mansion was fully locked up, but I felt uneasy about leaving this room unmanned. After all, Kraus-sama and the others' meeting looks as though it will continue for quite some time. They might request some tea at any moment. That's true. Then what shall we do? Should I watch over? In that case, forgive me, Shan-chan, but son, but I'll ask that you patrol the mansion. I will stay here awaiting the family's orders. Yes. Shannon was slightly disgusted. Even though she'd come here to help out as a favor, she was casually being forced to do the job of the person actually on duty. Furthermore, after one-sidedly forcing that task on her, Goda returned to his magazine once again and became immersed in the crossword puzzle. Shannon bowed her head as a token sign of respect for her elder, then left the room to patrol the mansion. Thanks to her being a bit ticked off, she managed to suppress that floaty feeling she had been having until just now, and anyway, she couldn't let Genji or Cannon see her looking like this. She wanted a little time to herself until her heart calmed down, so maybe going on patrol wouldn't be so bad. She began to hear the tumultuous voices of the family discussion coming from the dining hall. Someone was speaking at great length, only to be interrupted by someone else. This second person also began to speak in a very long, drawn-out fashion, until yet another person interrupted. That kept on repeating. It was as though their displeasure was seeping out through their voices. She had been told to go to the guest house, so it would be bad if Kraus discovered her. Thinking this, Shannon dashed past the dining hall. Then she went along a prearranged route. Again, do you guys say route or route? Through the dark mansion, checking that all the locks were secure. She walked down the hall, checking each window. There were no humans on Rokkenjima other than those connected to the family, so locking up didn't really serve much of a purpose. No one had been in the habit of locking up the Ushiromiya head family, at least not until... The metal fixtures on the windows were ice cold, and as she checked them one by one, the glow in her heart seemed to cool down. So locking up didn't really seem much of a purpose. No one had been in the habit of locking up at the Ushiromiya head family, at least not until Natsui had scolded them for being careless. Hmm? Golden butterflies. At that time, she thought she saw something twinkling across the hall. Twinkling? How could anything be twinkling through the darkness of the hall? She figured she must have been imagining it, but she still held her breath. Grasping a curtain, she fearfully gazed down the hall. However, other than the occasional crack of thunder brightening the hallway, she was unable to glimpse any flicker again. It must have been her imagination, after all. Maybe her heart was so agitated that she'd seen something that didn't even exist. Shannon went back to checking the windows. However, a certain unnerving memory was resurrected in the back of her mind. It was that ghost story which had been passed down amongst the servants who served the Ushiromiya head family. The mansion had two different masters, one of the day and one of the night. Beatrice, the master of the night, would sometimes fly around the mansion in the form of sparkling butterflies. That was the story. Come to think of it, didn't Kanekun once say he'd seen it with his own eyes? Though he got sulky when I said he must have imagined it and refused to believe him. Could it possibly be true? The roar of the thunder gave no answer. All of the pieces are in place. What will you see on the game board? 24 o'clock. Midnight. 0000. The second day, October 5th, 1986. Genji tightened his bow tie and looked outside through a crack in the curtains. Maybe the rain had died down a tiny bit, but since the previous night, but the thick rain clouds didn't seem like they'd be letting any trace of the morning sun get by. The morning was dim and far from refreshing. It seems it will last all day after all. Sorry for keeping you waiting, Genji-sama. Cannon finished checking his appearance and exited the washroom. On their normal schedule, it was rare for anyone to have to suffer going straight from a midnight shift to an early morning shift. They were on a special schedule for the 2 days of the family conference. However, unless the typhoon passed today, the relatives' stay on the island would last until tomorrow. Cannon thought it best to be prepared for the special schedule to last an extra day. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas. The rose garden had been devastated by the wind and rain on the previous night. Even though they'd spent several days making it beautiful to welcome the guests, one stormy night was enough to ruin it. Cannon sighed. The two headed for the mansion. They were supposed to meet up with Goda and prepare breakfast. Goda was such a perfectionist that he had probably already woken up and was probably already preparing a breakfast as exquisite and elegant as glasswork. They reached the overhang by the entrance to the mansion and folded up their umbrellas. Genji took a bundle of several keys from his pocket and unlocked the front door. The Ushiromiya family mansion was the only thing on Rokkenjima, so in the past they hadn't been in the habit of locking up. However, Natsui had ordered that the mansion be locked up from midnight to early morning. Ever since then, unlocking the door in the early morning had become part of the servants' morning shift. This task had been given to Genji and Cannon so that Goda could start preparing breakfast as soon as he woke up. Silence had fallen in the mansion, giving the impression that the mansion itself was still asleep. Well then, let us begin the morning chores. Yes, sir. The two of them split up and began opening the curtains throughout the mansion. If the curtains stayed closed, the mansion would remain enveloped in faint darkness, as though it was still trapped in the previous night. Following a well-rehearsed procedure, Cannon went around the mansion opening the curtains for one window after another without having to retrace his steps once. Even with this horrible weather, drawing the curtains made it feel just a little bit like morning. While doing that, he passed in front of the kitchen. Even though he hadn't smelled anything yet, his stomach started aching for some of Goda's prized cooking. "Good morning." He tried to greet Goda, who should have been getting breakfast ready, but Goda was nowhere to be seen. The kitchen was darkly lit, and not only were the curtains not open, but the fan wasn't even running. It was still cold without any trace of a fire being lit, so of course there were no signs of breakfast being made either. Do you guys see either or either? Though it would have been inexcusable, perhaps Goda had overslept. Even servants are only human. They sometimes sleep in and show up late. In the rare case that such a thing happens, it's part of a servant's code to hide the unsightly scene before anyone notices, smoothly cover it up, and make sure the family never even realizes that anything has gone wrong. Cannon took the receiver of the phone that had been fitted to the wall and dialed the number for the extension line in the servant sleeping room. Huh? He couldn't hear that characteristic sound of a dial tone. Cannon tried picking up the receiver again, but even so, he couldn't hear the usual dial tone. He tried dialing again, but it had no apparent effect. Could the lightning last night have damaged some machine, breaking the extension line? The equipment in this mansion was all worn out. Cannon fully understood that even the smallest thing could have caused it to break down. He gave up trying to wake Goda with the phone and dashed over to the servant sleeping room. How long has it been since I stopped sleeping and started lazily staring up at the ceiling? That vague sense of awakening was part of Natsui's usual morning experience. She always slept lightly, and she couldn't sleep at all without medicine. To Natsui, sleep was definitely not a happy thing. When she looked outside, she saw that it was still pouring. If she hadn't sensed a tiny amount of light, she might have mistakenly thought that it was still the previous night. She herself was one of the hosts, so she mustn't wake up later than her guests. Urging herself on, she raised up her body, which still hadn't completely recovered from yesterday's weariness. Again, you can say it's weariness or wariness. No one would torment her as long as she remained inside this room, and her headache wouldn't get any worse here. This room was the only place she could find peace, so when she left it, it meant returning to the world where her husband's siblings kept trying to stab each other in the back. In that case, wouldn't it be better to just stay locked up in this room forever? That ridiculous notion brought a bitter smile to Natsui's face. She was starting to sound like Kenzo. Though she often complained about Kenzo staying locked up in his own room and refusing to attend everyone else, the truth was that she longed to do the same. Natsui gave her head a small shake, and her fantasy was replaced with a reawakening of her usual headache. When she reached for the doorknob trying to leave her room, her hand touched the scorpion charm that she had hung from it before going to sleep the previous night. It was Maria's charm, which Natsui had received from Jessica. Didn't Jessica say something about it having the power to repel magic, telling her to hang it from her doorknob? Maybe it was thanks to the charm that at least this room had been protected from the malice of her husband's siblings. As she thought this, her mood began to get a little bit more cheerful. I wonder if I have Jessica to thank for the little bit of peaceful sleep I managed to receive. Then Natsui remembered. That's right, last night I promised Jessica that I'd give her a charm of my own in exchange for this one, didn't I? Natsui opened a drawer in her dresser and took out an antique accessory case that she had treasured when she was a child. Inside there was many small objects that Natsui had thought were valuable at the time. From amidst those, she pulled out a red pouch. Inside was a small round mirror about 10 centimeters across. It looked quite old, but the design at the back of the mirror was very ornate, and it felt like something with historical value. At the very least, it seemed much more authentic than the other charm, which looked like a plastic scorpion keychain. She had heard that this was a spiritual mirror for warding off evil spirits, and she had been given it especially by her grandmother when her grandfather's memories had been distributed. Mementos. It had been believed since long ago that a strange power resided in this mirror. Perhaps people thought it could reflect calamity and malice in the same way it reflected light. Natsui returned the mirror to its pouch. It would probably be a fitting object to hand over to Jessica. Just as she was placing it in her pocket, the sound of someone knocking on the door suddenly echoed throughout the room. "Yes? Good morning, madam. It's Genji. It is Genji. Madame? My apologies for waking you so early. I'm coming now. What is it?" No servant had ever come to her this early in the morning, nor had they come to wake her in person. Perhaps something bad had happened? Maybe some fatal oversight had been made while preparing breakfast, something that would shame the household in front of their guests. Natsui took a deep breath in anticipation for whatever troubles she was about to hear of. When she opened the door, Genji once again gave a morning greeting while bowing deeply. Natsui tentatively responded. "Good morning." "Did something happen?" "My apologies. It would seem that the telephones have broken down due to the lightning last night. The extension telephone isn't working, so please forgive my coming to see you directly." "The extension telephone isn't working? That will be troublesome. Will it be possible to fix it?" "I am afraid we don't know the location of the damage. Later on, I would like to call in an expert and have him repair it." "Does that mean we'll be unable to have it repaired until after the typhoon passes? Then it will remain broken down for the duration of our guests' stay. Will that hamper our efforts to take care of our guests?" "We will do all we can to ensure there are no problems." "Very well. I'm counting on you to make sure we have no blunders." Natsui let out a small sigh of relief. She had prepared for the worst, but damage to the telephones wasn't that the kind of trouble she was worried about? Then again, even this would probably be enough to spark sarcasm from Ava. Natsui gave her head a light shake. Are the preparations for breakfast proceeding well? As to that, we haven't been able to find Goda. The arrangements for breakfast have yet to be carried out. What did you say? Natsui was indignant. To her, this was a much bigger problem than the phone's not working. I mean, people can just pour themselves a bowl of cereal. And despite that, this piece of information was the part that has been postponed. By 2 seconds? Why did everything go well most of the time, and then come to something like this, when the relatives were visiting? Natsui put her hand to her forehead and shook her head. Well, I suppose he slept in. At any rate, just to see to it that someone hurries up and prepares breakfast. I don't care who. What? Natsui exited into the hall and turned around for a second to close the door to her room. The creepy thing she saw there silenced her completely. It was an unpleasant sight, as though someone had dipped their fingers in a reddish-black liquid and scratched at the door around the doorknob. It was probably some sort of awful prank, arranged by some person who wanted to make it look as though they tried to force the door open with bloody hands. It's almost like that scorpion charm probably saved your life. What sort of prank is this? How awful. I also just noticed it as I came to call you. I will clean it later. But perhaps this is a vulgar joke by one of the guests. Disgusting. Truly disgusting. Who in the world will pull such a childish and disgusting prank? Natsui had a pretty good idea, but of course there was no proof. So even if she pushed the issue, it would just seem as though she was making a fuss about nothing. In fact, it would surely be better to act as though she hadn't even realized that such a prank had been played on her. Natsui gave the order to have it cleaned and headed off to the parlor with a squeak of her heels. When Natsui and Genji arrived in the parlor, Eva and Hideyoshi were already there. Good morning, everyone. Morning, Natsui-san. I heard Goda-san would be making us breakfast, too. My stomach's been getting all excited since I woke up. Wahaha! After all, it seems food is all you can look forward to as the head of the at the head family household. Giggle, giggle. I'm pleased to see that you too are in high spirits so early in the morning, Eva-sama. With a weary expression, Natsui returned Ava's gaze, which was fiercely competitive, despite the early hour. Then Cannon jogged in. After bowing an apology to the relatives for running inside the mansion, he noticed Genji and told him something in a small voice. Cannon? Have you still not found Goda? My apologies, madam. I went all over the inside of the mansion and the guest house, but I still haven't found him. Where in the world has he gone? At any rate, breakfast is a higher priority than finding Goda right now. See to it immediately. Yes. Cannon glanced at Genji. It seemed he had something else to report, but was uncertain whether or not the words should come from him. Genji nodded and decided to give the report himself. Madam, it is not only Goda. Your husband is also nowhere to be found. My husband? Yes. Even before visiting you, I went to his room to tell him that breakfast wasn't being prepared, but I did not find him there. Furthermore, he is not the only one missing. Rudolph-sama, his wife, and Rosa-sama are nowhere to be found. Not in the guest house, nor the mansion. Yes, they were not in their rooms in the guest house either. When she'd heard that Goda alone was missing, she assumed he had slept in or was loafing around somewhere. However, now that she'd learned that several of the relatives were also nowhere to be seen, she began to take a slightly more optimistic view. Could last night's family conference have continued all night up until the present moment? If so, they might have wanted to cool their heads off after being shut in a stuffy room, going out for walks on their own throughout the rain. Part about cooling their heads really sounded like something Kraus would say. Goda had probably been summoned to accompany them and aid them in some way. Goda was not a man who lost track of time. He had to understand that preparations for breakfast would be hindered if he did not return. However, maybe the family conference had continued into this very moment, with an atmosphere that would make it hard for anyone to slip out. Yes, that theory would be quite convincing for Natsui. She remembered the illusion she'd felt that morning as though the previous night had never ended. When she learned that the feeling wasn't just an illusion, she once again took a deep breath. Deep, weary breath. After all, that banquet of filthy vultures circling Kenzo's property was still going on. Perhaps they are still discussing the inheritance somewhere in the garden, or maybe the beach. At any rate, if we don't call Goda back, we'll never be able to begin preparations for breakfast. So, what are you saying? Are Nissan and the rest still continuing their discussion? She had planned to say it in a small voice, but Hideyoshi overheard Natsui and managed to grasp the situation. Nissan and Rudolph sure are tough. Maybe it's just youth in Rose's case? Just a bit after midnight, the two of us were so tired that we headed back to bed. Though I do remember that Nissan and the rest were still having a heated discussion at that point. Men certainly are unpleasant when they get all fired up. Natsui snorted, her face still blank. Cannon, search outside. If you find Goda, tell him to return immediately and begin preparing breakfast. Certainly. Natsui Nissan, we don't know for sure that they're outside, do we? Couldn't they also be inside Father's study? I see. That's certainly possible. Okay, that's the least likely thing possible, unless they broke the fuck in or some shit. But, I don't see Kenzo letting them in. Even a single one, let alone that bit of a rabble-rousing. I don't know what path the conversation took, but there's certainly a chance they moved Father's study and let him on the discussion. Like he'd ever fucking let them in. I can't imagine that Father would willingly let them bring such a detestable topic into his study. You really think so? Well then, there's nothing we can do. I'm sorry, Genji-san and Kanon-kun, but could you search outside? It wouldn't be that strange for Nissan to suggest they go outside for a walk to cool their heads. Even in this weather, I'll go to Father's study. Who knows, they might actually be there after all. Eva-san, I couldn't ask a guest like you to exert herself so. I will go. I can also wish him a good morning while I'm at it. Okay, then I'll leave it in your hands. Though I somehow doubt he'll return your greeting. Natsui-san, have you always been on such good terms with Father? I don't know whether you could call it that. But I am sure that I have gained his trust as the wife of the successor of the Ushiromiya family. Then I'm sure he'll at least answer you, right? I'd like to at least have breakfast with my father. Do you think you could convince him to come down and join us? It seems he thoroughly despises the rest of us, but I'm sure he'll listen to you if he trusts you that much. After speaking so boldly, if you're unable to convince Father to come down alone, then I doubt you'll ever be able to claim that you've earned his trust again. Giggle, giggle, giggle. I am not confident, but I will try. Natsui responded looking discouraged. However, knowing Kenzo's temperament, she had absolutely no confidence in her ability to bring him out. Ava was clearly mocking her, confident that Natsui wouldn't be able to get Kenzo to come down. But even so, Natsui would lose face if she gave up, saying it was impossible and letting Ava go instead. Ava's mean-spirited and unreasonable demand made Natsui clench her fists slightly. When Genji realized this, he softly spoke to her over her shoulder. Madam, please take this if you would. And this is? Genji handed Natsui a sparkling gold key of ornate design. It was the key to Kenzo's study. The study had an auto-lock and couldn't be unlocked as long as Kenzo forbade entrance. However, since Genji was especially trusted by Kenzo, he was allowed to carry a key to that door. But if this key is used, won't you also receive the blame? When the master is sleeping deeply, simply knocking on the door will not suffice, and it would be more difficult to persuade the master to leave his room if you must talk through the door. Please use this. Genji. Until now, Natsui had thought of Genji as a cold servant, who wouldn't do anything for her since he worked directly under Kinzo, but it looked like she would have to alter her understanding of him. She wanted to communicate her gratitude, but by then, Genji had already turned his back on her and was walking down the corridor of Cannon. But as Natsui watched them go, the words directed at her from behind were sneering. Well then, you must bring father with you, okay? After all, it's his son's precious wife who's asking. I'm sure he'll listen to you. Giggle, giggle, giggle. We're guests, so we'll just relax here at our leisure. Quit it, Ava. You're taking this too far. Sorry, Natsui-ni-san, but we're counting on you to deal with father. Without answering, Natsui forcefully spun around on her heels and quickly left that place. After all that excitement the previous night, there was no way anyone was going to wake up early. George, Nikki, Jessica, and I were snoring loudly on the beds in the cousins' room, but Maria, who had gone straight to bed without joining in, was completely awake. As she rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around, she was met with the loud snoring of the other three cousins. For a while, Maria had to think about what had happened. After that, she realized that her mother wasn't with her, and she quickly got lonely. Maria left the cousin room, trying to head to the room that had been arranged for her and her mother. Paying no heed to the three who were sleeping soundly, she slammed the door shut. In response, Battler mumbled and rolled over to sleep, but it wasn't enough to wake him. After a while, Maria returned, once again opening the door with a lively bang. Ooh! When she had left the room, her face had been sleepy, but now she was back, she looked irritated. After that, she climbed up on Battler's bed, which happened to be the closest, and started yelling and jumping on it like it was a trampoline. Ooh, oh, oh! Wake up! Ooh! What? Is it an enemy raid? Surround them! After making sure I was awake, Maria moved over to George and Iki's bed and started jumping on that too. In that manner, the three of us all were greeted with an extremely pleasant awakening. Thanks for waking us up, Maria-chan. You stopped us from sleeping in after that late night. If only you could have been a bit more gentle about it. George Nisan, you really are an adult. I respect that. It'll be 7 o'clock soon. Well, it's not really a bad time to wake up. Yawn. Ooh, Mama's not here. Ooh. Aunt Rosa? She wasn't in her room. I wonder if she's already woken up and gone to the mansion. Not here. Ooh. Mama. Maria kept groaning ooh and looking unhappy. She didn't exactly seem lonely because her mother wasn't around. It was more like she was irritated and thrown off balance because her mother wasn't where she'd expected. If we could just tell her where her mother was, that alone would probably calm her down. But unfortunately, we had no way of knowing where Aunt Rosa was except that she wasn't here. Anyway, it's time for breakfast, so let's head over to the mansion. That's right. Maria, let's go to the mansion together, okay? I'm sure Aunt Rosa will be there too. Ooh, Mama's in the mansion? Then I'll go there. Ooh. Yeah, guess we should go to the mansion. Our parents have probably already gone there. Maria regained her usual composure so completely her earlier tantrum now seemed like a lie. We got dressed, left the room, and headed for the mansion. Once more there was a knocking sound on the study door, but there was no answer. He seemed to be sleeping still, and I could not wake him. If she went back downstairs and said something like that, Ava would probably be amused and triumphant. And even putting Ava aside, it was problematic that Kenzo had stayed shut away during the entire once-a-year conference, not even coming down to greet anyone. Even the family head, no, especially the family head, couldn't fail to make an appearance. I wonder if I could convince him myself. Natsui readied herself and used the key that she had borrowed from Genji to open the door. Even though she was prepared for the sweet stench which seemed to eat into one's brain as it poured out the small crack in the door, she couldn't help but grimace, thinking that he might still be sleeping. Natsui entered the room quietly. When she did, Kenzo was already awake and looking down out of the window. So you're awake? Good morning. How did you get in? Kenzo spoke with his back still facing her. His voice was not harsh but calm, and Natsui was slightly reassured. However, though he was awake, he wouldn't have ignored all that knocking if he was in a good mood. Natsui wasn't able to relax. My sincere apologies. I asked Genji-san and he allowed me to borrow the key to the study. Oh, Genji did? If my friend thought it was that important, then I have no choice but to listen. So, what business do you have with me? Well, breakfast will be ready soon, and I would greatly appreciate if you would join us. I will eat here. Have it brought here like always. But Father, this family conference happens only once a year. Please, at least let them see your face. Go back downstairs. Are you asking me to join in as they discuss how to chew up my inheritance after I die? How foolish. Let them speak of such matters as much as they please without me. And if that's what you call a family conference, it's hardly worth leaving my room for it. I am busy. Do not bother me. His last words carried a threat that any further questions would not be appreciated. Natsui realized that adding any further pleas would bring his wrath down upon her. She didn't look forward to facing Ava's sarcasm, but there was nothing more Natsui could do. Is that so? Understood. I am sure everyone will be sorry to hear it, but I will tell them. Natsui decided to give up. Bowing silently, she tried to leave the room before Kenzo's spasmodic temper could flare up. As she did, Kenzo spoke to her. His voice was so calm and gentle, it felt like it came from an entirely different person. Natsui, it has been quite some time since you married into the Ushiromiya family. Yes? It has been many years since I was first permitted to bear the name Ushiromiya. Do you sometimes long for your previous family? No. Marriage means abandoning your birth family. I am Ushiromiya Natsui. The Ushiromiya family is the only family I can come home to, the only one I am fond of. She truly wasn't exaggerating. Such was the resolve she felt whenever she applied the Ushiromiya family name to herself, and that's precisely why she was so saddened when her husband didn't treat her like an Ushiromiya, leaving her to race about in vain. If Kraus were a woman, and you his husband. No, I won't say that. Well, what do you mean by that? Father? Natsui was shocked. If Kenzo's words just now were what they seemed, it would have been more than enough to make up for all that she had suffered up to that point. Forget it. It's just the nonsense of an old man. Kenzo once again faced away from her. He had told her to forget it, but Natsui couldn't help feeling a warmth in her heart. Father. Even though I, Natsui, am not connected to you by blood, I still am your daughter. I will most assuredly see to it that your honor and glory and everything you have left behind are protected. You do not have the right to wear the one-winged eagle. However, the one-winged eagle is surely engraved in your heart. That is irrefutable proof that you are my blood relative, one who will inherit the glory of the Ushiromiya family. Some will sneer that there is no eagle on your clothes, but such words are not worth lending an ear to. Only those who hold the eagle in their hearts are my true blood relatives. I now consider it an honor you were welcome to the Ushiromiya family. Without saying anything more, Kenzo remained with his back to Natsui. However, Natsui couldn't help but feel something warm well up inside of her that she hadn't felt since long ago when she had been just a child. Natsui bowed silently to his back and left the room. Ah, good timing. How is father? You were taking so long, so I came to check. When Natsui left the study, she saw Eva climbing the stairs, and their eyes met. Eva was smirking unpleasantly, thinking that Natsui would leave grudgingly after failing to convince Kenzo. However, the way Natsui was now, such a frivolous laugh would not disturb her. She was not permitted to wear the family crest on her clothing, but she was permitted to wear it in her heart. So she spoke calmly, clearly, and confidently, with the dignity of the one who would protect the Ushiromiya's family's glory. Father said he would not join in on the family conference. He says he has no interest in discussing such obscene matters. I figured you'd say something like that. If you fail to persuade father, just say so. How pitiful. I'm beginning to see why father lamented so. But what do you mean by that? Natsui did not answer. Just as Kenzo had done earlier, she showed Eva her back as she headed down the stairs. Eva finally realized that she was being made fun of, that something had happened to quickly bolster Natsui's confidence. Even so, she apparently didn't have the courage to risk Kenzo's wrath. Unable to even knock on the door, she could only click her tongue, make a motion as though scratching at it, and follow after Natsui. So were Nissan and the rest there? Did you ask father about them? I didn't get the chance to ask, but they were not inside the study. Father would never let them into his room to discuss such a lowly topic, so it is unlikely he knows where they went. Let us go downstairs and wait for the servants to return from their search. Breakfast may be late. But how would you like some tea, Eva-san? That would be fine. Eva couldn't hide her confusion at the complete difference in Natsui's attitude. She was acting so boldly, and while Eva hated to admit it, she even had a sense of dignity about her. Unable to find fault with anything, Eva could only follow Natsui's back to the parlor. When the two of them returned to the parlor, Hideyoshi had been joined by the 4 other children and Nanjo. I've already forgotten who Nanjo is. It's Doctor. Nanjo's the doctor. Cool. Genji, who had been talking with Hideyoshi, reported the current situation when he noticed that Natsui had returned. You still have not found my husband and the rest. Yes, my apologies. Also, Kumasawa has started preparing breakfast. She said that she will need a little longer. The clock read a little past 8. 8 o'clock should have been the time to start breakfast. Normally going over that time limit would be a disgrace to the host. It's not like you guys have anywhere else you have to go. Cannon is now searching outside. Also, no one has seen Shannon either. Even Shannon's missing? Truly, just how many people did my husband bring with him on his little walk? Just how many people had gone missing by now? Now that the number was this large, it was starting to feel truly unpleasant, as though the people here were the only ones being left out of something interesting. At least that seemed to reflect the feelings of the children and Maria in particular. She was indignant, her stomach grumbling, almost as though her mother and the others had left her alone to go off and eat something delicious without her. The other children were flipping through the channels on the television, trying to find a program that might interest Maria and cheer her up again. Nanjo was sitting on the sofa, gazing blissfully at the children while reading a book. It must have been a book about chess. The sound of footsteps came rushing towards them with a pitter-patter. There was only one set, so they realized before seeing who it belonged to that it was probably Cannon not Kraus and the rest. Madam, excuse me. Judging by your appearance, you still haven't been able to find them. It's like, no, I found them. Or at least, what's left of them. My apologies. I still haven't. That will be enough. You've worked hard. She didn't know where they were, but they had to be somewhere on this island. They hadn't had a thing to eat since the previous night, so their stomachs must be growling about now. They'd probably come plodding back of their own accord before long. By now, Natsui was thoroughly exasperated and started to feel that there was no reason for them to go out of their way and search. I will go to the kitchen and prepare some tea for all of the guests. Thanks to both of you for your hard work so early in the morning. Natsui left the parlor acting as though the release in tension had caused a new surge in her headache. Kanon tried to call her back, but Natsui left swiftly. What is it? Was there something else? Yes. I was unable to find her husband or anyone else, but, well, Kanon sounded evasive. It looked as though he didn't know where they were, but had spotted something that might have been connected to their disappearance. Eva and Hideyoshi noticed this exchange of words and came over. They'd probably picked up on something strange in Kanon's behavior. What's going on, Kanon-kun? Did you find Kraus, Nissan, and everyone else? Actually, the Rose Garden storehouse looked strange. What do you mean? It looked strange. It was, how should I explain it? Kanon hesitated once more. His tone wasn't at all what you'd expect from this usually fearless boy. Seeing this, Eva and Hideyoshi looked at each other dubiously. What do you mean? Are you saying Nissan and the others were inside the storehouse? No. I'm going to inspect the inside now. I just came back to get the key, but... I don't really get it. But it sounds like we've got to look around inside. Where's the key to that storehouse? It is in the servant room. Let us check inside the storehouse at once. Kanon dashed off to the servant room and returned with the key. Genji left the parlor, saying that he would go check. But then Eva and Hideyoshi followed after him. What was this something strange about the storehouse that had caused the usually fearless Kanon to hesitate? It was still pouring outside, but perhaps their curiosity over this something that Kanon couldn't talk about won out. While the children made a big fuss about watching television, Kanon and the rest dashed over to the entrance. The Rose Garden storehouse was a place that housed various tools used to manage the garden. It was definitely not a pretty building. Because of its appearance, it had been built so that it was hidden in a corner of the Rose Garden. Kanon, Genji, Eva, and Hideyoshi came cutting across the Rose Garden, holding umbrellas. They entered a small path just off the Rose Garden, which was normally off limits for those appreciating the garden and only used by those maintaining it. As they dashed down it, the storehouse came into the view in front of them. It was quite an old shed, and compared to the flawlessly perfect beauty of the Rose Garden, it was pretty seedy looking. It was easy to understand why it had been built in a hard-to-see place. Eva and Hideyoshi arrived at the storehouse long after Kanon and Genji. Ha! You two sure are fast. I thought my heart was going to explode. I never knew they had a storehouse way over here. But what is that? When Eva looked where Kanon was pointing, she was at a loss for words. Noticing this, Hideyoshi also followed Kanon's finger and was likewise too shocked to speak, and the entrance to the storehouse was a kind of shutter. And there, everyone suddenly realized what Kanon had been unable to find the words to describe what they now saw. On the shutter, which was completely filthy from being exposed to the wind and rain for so long, stuck right on it There was something that looked like a strange dark red liquid. Mucus? Or maybe it was some sticky paint? An indescribably eerie shape was drawn on the shutter, with some kind of ghastly substance. The rain had caused it to drip down like fresh blood, leaking from an open wound. No more beating around the bush. Some kind of mark was drawn there, with a ghastly substance that looked like blood, in a shape that seemed to suggest something ominous. 2 circles were drawn there, and inside them there was a design that looked like a cross. The 4 ends of the cross were widely exaggerated, and it looked like some kind of crest from somewhere around Europe. And in the cracks between these shapes, written closely packed together, were some unfamiliar characters or possibly symbols. What a vulgar bit of graffiti. Could this be one of those magic circles used in demonic ceremonies? It wasn't surprising in the video she would say that about such a ghastly shape drawn with a deep red dripping substance. When was this made? There was nothing drawn here when I came by yesterday before it started raining. We must do something before anyone else sees this. If they laid eyes upon it, would cause them great discomfort. That's right. Even though it's just a shed, I wouldn't want to leave such an unpleasant piece of graffiti alone for even a second longer than I had to. There is some paint inside the storehouse, probably under all the dead bodies. Let us paint over it temporarily as an emergency measure, then repaint it again someday when the weather is good. Genji remembered that he had just recently seen another scribble, and that it too had been made with a strange red, dark red substance of the same color as this. That must have been, that's right, he had seen it on the door to Natsui's room. Canon-kun, let's remove this scribble quickly and go back, okay? Even though it's just a storehouse, it's really irritating to have graffiti around the home I was brought up in. Yes, ma'am. I will take care of it immediately. Cannon squatted in front of the shutter and unlocked it. He then lifted it up with all of his strength. A boisterous noise resounded, and the eerie shape drawn on the shutter began to get sucked into the top as the shutter was raised. At least for the time being, that ominous drawing disappeared from the direct gaze, and they all breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to a kids program they came across, Maria was feeling much better. Battler and Jessica were poking fun at the kids' show at every turn, cackling together. George was enjoying the program with Maria from her perspective. Nanjo sat on the sofa by himself, passing the time by reading quietly. They heard hurried footsteps coming from the hallway. They were the footsteps of a single person. Did that mean it wasn't the group of 4 that had just left? It was Genji. It was very rare for Genji, who considered being out of breath a violation of a servant's virtues, to be gasping for air. He had probably come dashing back from outside the mansion. His shoulders were soaking wet, and he didn't have his usual trim appearance. When Genji noticed Nanjo looking at him, he gave a small, silent bow and quickly approached him. Dr. Nanjo, my apologies. Please come with me quickly. What is the matter? As Genji whispered something into Nanjo's ear, Nanjo went pale. He rose from the sofa, trying not to be noticed by the children who were still engrossed by the TV, and the 2 of them rapidly left the parlor, muffling their footsteps. Just as they were about to exit the parlor, they came across Natsui, who was pushing a serving cart loaded with a tea set. Genji whispered something into Natsui's ear, and Natsui went pale, too, in apparent shock. Then, leaving the serving cart where it was, the three of them dashed toward the entrance. George noticed them running down the rose garden through the window. What's that? Isn't that Genji-san and Dr. Nanjo and that's Aunt Natsui, isn't it? What's up, Aniki? Maybe something happened. They looked terribly flustered. When Jessica and Maria saw that Eva, Hideyoshi, and Nanjo were no longer in their seats and that the serving cart had been abandoned at the entrance to the parlor, they also realized that something was the matter. Could there have been some kind of accident? Let's go check it out. It's no fun if we're the only ones left out, right? Eehee? For some reason, what Battler said sounded extremely indiscreet, but they couldn't deny that they were a little insecure and concerned after seeing the adults run off into the rain without regards to their appearance. Let's check it out, okay? I'm worried something might have happened. Jessica's uneasy words spoke for all of them. Hey, Maria, are you coming too? Or will you watch TV? Ooh? Want to watch TV? Ooh. Let's go on without her. Maria-chan, we'll be back soon. You keep watching TV, okay? Ooh. By the time the kids made it outside, the adults were no longer in sight, but Jessica seemed to have a pretty good idea where they'd gone, judging by the direction they had been running. Following Jessica, we ran through the rain-soaked rose garden. The wind seemed to suddenly get stronger. The malicious sound of thunder began to rumble like it had the previous night. It felt like the eerie something that surrounded the island and was trying to stop us from moving forward. Jessica, is there something over this way? I'm pretty sure there is a shed for gardening tools or something. What in the world could be going on in a place like that? Just as Jessica had said, they began to see a storehouse in front of them. They could also see the adults there. The shutter to the storehouse was open, and several adults looked as though they were searching for something. For some reason, only Natsui was outside the storehouse without even holding an umbrella, and she looked like she was hanging her head and her back was facing them. There was Genji, Nanjo, and Natsui, who had just left the mansion. The ones who'd left earlier, Ken and Eva and Hideyoshi, were also there, making for a small crowd of people. But there was absolutely no bustle of activity. When Natsui realized that the children were approaching, a terrible expression rose to her face, and she ran at them with her arms spread wide. You mustn't come any closer. Go back to the mansion. But despite that, no, because of that, the kids saw the scene Natsui was trying to keep them away from. Inside the storehouse, with the shutter wide open, a faint fluorescent light shone down. And right there was... Kia! Jessica's piercing shriek rang out. But that was just because Jessica's scream was the loudest. The same thing spilled out of Battler and George's mouths as well. Ava spread her arms just like Natsui, roaring at the kids with a bone-chilling expression on her face. George, take everyone and return to the mansion. Quickly, right now. When Natsui spread her arms, I thought she was trying to prevent us from advancing any further, but that wasn't why Ava was spreading her arms right now. She was trying to stop us kids from seeing that terrible scene. It was her mother's heart. I know this is an inappropriate time, but I like the music. Trying to protect the eyes and the hearts of us children by blocking our view of that terrible scene by the least the width of one of her arms. Is this some kind of joke? Is it? I'd seen this kind of cheap scene all too often. In manga, TV, anime, and movies. I'd seen it over and over again. This was just seeing something appear in real life that I'd seen plenty of times before in some of those more sensational movies, right? That alone shouldn't... but that suit, it's that old bastard's, isn't it? I get it. Then that's Uncle Kraus. And Kairi-san and Aunt Rosa. Yeah. Dad! You mustn't, Jessica. You mustn't go in. You mustn't look. Dad. Rigor mortis has set in across almost the entire body. Most likely, 6 hours or more have passed since death. As far as I can tell by looking at the damaged area, there is a high probability they were damaged after their deaths. No, I must watch what I say. I'm a general practitioner. Examining corpses is outside my area of expertise. So what's going on here? Just killing them wasn't enough, so they went on to do something like this? The devil. This here is the work of the devil. Aunt Natsui caught Jessica in her arms, and Aunt Ava caught George Aniki. So I was the only one who could approach the entrance to the storehouse. If only there had been someone there to catch me too. I wouldn't have needed to have this horrible, evil scene burned into my eyes. No, that's not it. It isn't that there's no one here to catch me. The people who should catch me, they're right there, aren't they? Just as Jessica said, it did look like a storehouse for gardening tools. A lawnmower of extra blades, a grass sickle and a hammer, some carpentry tools such as a saw, piled up potted plants and bags of fertilizer, and treated just the same the corpses of several people had been laid to rest there, no, had been tossed in there. I could tell them by their clothes, that old bastard and Kairi-san, Uncle Kraus and Aunt Rosa. Beyond that, Goda-san and... Are there still more of them? How many people died? You're fucking kidding me. That's more than I can count on one hand. Damn it! I didn't know whether it had been one of these gardening tools which, if used for something other than their intended purpose, which could definitely be wielded with a naked brutality, or whether some horrible tool had been brought in here specifically for this. Anyway, each one of the bodies jammed in here had been given an atrocious makeup. It wasn't makeup, it was more like their faces had been plowed. Their faces were smashed, forced into expressions that normal people couldn't make even after death. I couldn't tell where their eyes or noses were, but I could find their mouths because they were gaping wide, their gums exposed. But their front teeth were missing, and even their cheeks that should have covered all that were torn up and laid bare. That trendy makeup you always spent so much time on even though you're a man isn't doing a thing now. Dad, I always thought you were going to go to hell, but still not like this, right? You aren't such a son of a bitch that you should have to suffer so brutally. And Kairi-san, didn't I tell you to stop going out with this guy? There's absolutely no reason for you to end up like this too. They've got no faces. No faces. Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. Ah. Battler-san. You mustn't look anymore. There's no way your mother and father would want you to see them like this, let alone have your last memory of them be of this. For their sakes, you mustn't look anymore. Dead people are supposed to have their faces that look like they're sleeping peacefully, right? They've got no faces. My dad and Kairi-san have no faces. I don't even know what kind of faces they were wearing when they died. What's wrong with me? Will I have to see the smashed monster-like faces every time I remember them? That's just great. I didn't want to remember the old bastard's smug face anyway. Just great, just great. But why even Kairi-san's face? Kairi-san wasn't a crook. Sure, she ticked me off a bit now and then, but she was like a cool big sister to me. This is wrong. This is all wrong. At least Uncle Kraus has it better, doesn't he? It's not his whole face, just the side. At least he's got half his face left, right? That's still better, that's still better. No. Jessica filled her ears with the sound of her own screaming, trying to shut out my reckless words. Stop it, Battler-kun. Just stop it, just stop it. Aniki, Aniki. Disregarding age and appearance. I fell to my knees, clinging to Aniki's waist and sobbing. It was as if I was crying on behalf of everyone there. Representing the feelings of everyone there, I screamed over and over. Father. The ones lying dead, lying over there. Uncle Kraus, Uncle Rudolph, Aunt Kairi, Aunt Rosa, Goto-san, just those 5, right? No. There are 6 people. There's one more person over here. The body Hideyoshi was looking down on now happened to be hidden among the shadows in the mountain range of objects, in a blind spot to George, who stood by the entrance. So George couldn't tell whose body it was, so George cursed himself. He cursed the fact that his worst guesses always turned out to be right. So, the one lying at your feet is Shannon, isn't it? Yes, it's Shannon-chan. George fell completely silent. He shook slightly, his lower lip trembling. Normally, he would have wanted to run to his beloved's body, screaming and crying. However, before rashly rushing forward, he worked to keep his composure and asked his father, "Is Shannon the same as Uncle Kraus and the others?" Hideyoshi deeply understood the meaning of those words, so he couldn't give George an immediate answer, or rather he felt that silence was the only sincere and loving response he could give George right now. When George asked if Shannon was the same, he meant to ask whether her corpse was in the same condition as the others or not. Since Hideyoshi hadn't denied it, it meant her corpse was in the same brutal state. "Can I look at Shannon?" "No, you can't." "Why not? After all, I won't be able to see Shannon's face again, right? So why won't you let me see what her face looked like at the end? The last time you met Shannon was yesterday, right?" "Yes." "I see. When you left her, what kind of face was she showing you?" It was a wonderful smile. After he handed her the ring, she hesitated, even though she must have already made up her mind. Then she looked bashful, and ran away because she was embarrassed to let him see her face looking like that. That's the expression that was revived in George's mind. "I see. Then I'm sure Shannon-chan would want you to leave. Would want to leave you with that smile in your memory." Hideyoshi looked down upon Shannon's body, lying at his feet. Just like the other bodies, it was in such a horrible state that it'd make anyone to cover their eyes. Her head had been smashed in from the side, and no more than half of her expression remained. If the remaining blood-soaked half of her expression had been wiped clean, would that graceful smile of hers have peeked out, but only half of it. Without thinking, Hideyoshi slapped his hands over his eyes. How brutal. If her face was going to be crushed anyway, then if only all of it had been crushed, he might have been able to temporarily distract George from his pain by making this pathetic suggestion that it was someone else wearing Shannon's clothes, but half of her face had been left untouched. It caused the body so much humiliation while still proving beyond doubt that the body was Shannon's and no one else's. How inhuman. How brutish. And there, trying his best to burn the image of the remaining half of Shannon's expression to his eyes as she lay at Hideyoshi's feet, was Cannon. Cannon was not crying. Tears had risen to his eyes, but they did not drip down. But that didn't mean he wasn't feeling as much sadness as everyone else. Losing Shannon, who had lived with him in the same orphanage, whom he had loved as a sister, must have been just as losing a blood relative. George, I'm sure Shannon-chan is saying thank you. She must be glad you didn't end up seeing her in such a pitiful state. I'm sure she's thanking you for holding strong and showing restraint. I understand. I understand, Father, I understand. George leaned against the outside wall of the storehouse, crouching down limply. Father, I have a request. What is it? I want you to look for me. Is there a ring on Shannon's finger? A ring? Let me see. Hideyoshi crouched down. As he did, Cannon slightly pointed to one of Shannon's hands. Yeah, there is. It's a diamond ring. With a valuable diamond. Must have been pretty expensive. And which hand and which finger is it on? The ring finger of her left hand. I see. So Shannon-chan was engaged. George? Don't tell me you. Ava, that doesn't matter now. A man made a lifelong promise to Shannon-chan. A man promised her happiness for life. Who that man was isn't the issue here. Being told that by a man is a woman's dream, isn't it? I don't know when she received this ring. I also don't know who gave it to her. However, even so, Shannon-chan took this ring. Then she accepted it and put it on her left ring finger. I'm sure the man who gave it to her was also happy. To most of the people there, Hideyoshi was simply disturbed by this extraordinary situation and was simply blurting out nonsense. However, someone who knew of George and Shannon's true relationship would understand the full meaning of those words. I see. Thank you. Father. George stood up. The traces of tears still streaked his face, but his expression had returned to its usual calm one. Let's go. Battler-kun, Jessica-chan. If we stay here any longer, we'll get in the way of the adults. Sniff. You're right. Jessica sniffled once more, showing her face to her mother, who had been holding her for the whole time, to let her know she was okay now. When she faced George again, she once again had on her usual expression, although she still couldn't smile. Battler, hang in there. Battler kept on crouching in front of his parents' bodies. I'm sorry. Cry like hell, calm me down. You bastard, Dad, I bet you're laughing at me. After all that shit I talked about you, here I am crying like a baby just 'cause you died. Well, so what? I guess I just got the gene that makes you cry when your parents kick the bucket. Battler's face was still bright red from the tears, but he at least had recovered enough to fake a smile, if only a bitter one. Cannon, you mustn't remain here any longer either. Take the children and return to the mansion. Natsui had been standing under the rain the whole time, unable to take a step into the storehouse. Maybe she had her own way of grieving, different from Battler's. I'm sure she's just as upset, but in that situation, there's two things, which I can understand very much so myself. One, sometimes it's important to ignore your own emotions for the sake of trying to help and protect others. Two, sometimes things emotionally hurt to such a degree that you go into a bit of a state of shock, and it takes time for you to process your own emotions. It takes you time to really feel very strong negative feelings that are perhaps a bit too overwhelming to acknowledge in the moment. I suppose it could be likened to a degree of apathy and numbness that comes as a self-defense mechanism when something is too overwhelmingly painful to deal with. Where you sort of put a little bit of distance between yourself and your own feelings. I wouldn't even call it like a wall or anything. I would say, I suppose the correct word for it would be dissociation. But you guys get what I'm trying to say. Realizing that she had to take on a role of responsibility now that her husband was dead, she gave Cannon those orders. Yes, madam. Cannon rose silently and turned to face me. His face was pure white as though his own heart had died along with Shannon, and there was no life left in his expression. On an ordinary day, if he had been told to guide the children through the beautiful rose garden, Cannon might have led the way, but now there was no distinction between Cannon and children. They were now just kids of about the same age, suffering the pain of losing those close to them. After making sure that the children were leaving, Natsui started giving orders to Genji. Genji, contact the police immediately. They probably won't be able to come until the typhoon passes, but they should be able to tell us what to do next. Understood. There is an emergency radio, so I'll use that to contact them. When she heard that, Natsui remembered. That's right, the phones were out today, weren't they? However, they also had a radio since they couldn't necessarily rely on phones all the time while living on an isolated island. At any rate, they should start by contacting the police and receiving their instructions. Everything else could wait. Dr. Nanjo, is there anything more you can do here? Unfortunately, there is nothing I can do. Understood. Genji, could you at least cover their faces with something? Exposing them like this is humiliating to them as well. Yes, ma'am. Genji picked up several dried towels from inside the storehouse when Ava stopping him with a shrill voice. Wait a second. Stop. This is the scene of a crime, isn't it? Then we mustn't disturb it. We all panicked and walked in here with our shoes on, but even that will surely get in the way of the police investigation, right? Natsui glared at Ava, offended. Objectively speaking, Ava was right. Even so, she glared at Ava as though accusing her of refusing to do those tragic corpses which had been humiliated even after death. the simple kindness of covering their faces. However, Ava had spoken both calmly and correctly. This horrible situation definitely wasn't an accident. It was a crime. Someone had killed them. It was a murder case. So they needed to be careful to avoid disturbing the site any further. They had to do what little they could to aid the police, preserving clues that might help them catch the detestable culprit. I agree with Ava-san. Until the police come, we should leave everything be. What do you say, madam? You're right. Very well. Close it up. And just in case, we should put a different lock on it. A different lock? Yes. When we came here, the shutter was locked. That means the culprit used the key to shutter and lock it. That makes sense. So does that mean the key that opens the shutter will have the culprit's fingerprints on it? I'm sure it'll be worth submitting it to the police as evidence, but Cannon-kun usually has it, and he used it to unlock the shed just now. The other thing is this, there's also the question of this. Who would be physically capable of doing this? Cannon wouldn't even be able to carry Aunt Rosa here. So the question is, who would even be physically capable of doing this? It'll probably have Cannon's fingerprints on it. Also, the key was handed to Genji-san just now, and he took it with his bare hands. It doesn't look like it'll be very useful as evidence. That was careless of me. My apologies. Genji-san, are there any other keys to this storehouse? No. Only this one. It's not a complicated lock. I imagine anyone who was, capable of doing this either already has their own copy of a key made or is a master lockpicker. So the culprit walked out of the servant room with that key, and then was nice enough to return the key to where they found it. Hideyoshi's theory sounded plausible, but was actually very strange if you thought about it. Well, what if there's a copy of the key? Or the person could just lockpick. Why would they go to all the trouble returning the key they stole? No, if you think about it even more deeply, there are some points that are even more bizarre. When a criminal hides a body, they're usually trying to delay the point at which it'll be found, so they can use the time to escape. The six weren't necessarily killed here, but it was reasonable to assume that they were killed somewhere on the island, carried to the storehouse, and hidden to delay the discovery of the crime. And yet, the eerie magic circle was scribbled on the storehouse shutter, had eloquently indicated the location of the hidden corpses. Sure, it didn't explicitly mention the corpses, but 6 people had gone missing. In that situation, someone had made such an obvious piece of graffiti and even returned the key to the shutter. Almost as though they wanted the corpses here to be discovered. Anyway, we can't put all our faith in a lock that the culprit has opened once before. If we want to protect this place from the culprit's hand, I think we should put a new lock on it. I think that is a good plan. Assuming the culprit's still here, wouldn't they just pour gasoline all over that? I mean, even in a rainstorm, I think that it would still catch fire. Especially broke a window and threw the gasoline inside the building. I'm pretty sure it would still burn down regardless of the rain. I think that is a good plan. I agree. Genji fished around inside the storehouse and unsealed a brand new padlock that had been inside a small... Why did we have the extra padlock? What should I do with the key? I will take it. I will take responsibility and hand it over to the police. Natsui took the key to the padlock from Genji's hand. After that, they all exited and lowered the shutter. And so the corpses were once again sealed behind the shutter, which was still covered with that creepy magic circle. Genji crouched down in front of the shutter to fasten the new padlock. Shutters often have a place in front where you can attach your own lock, in addition to the main lock of the shutter. This one was one of those types. In the midst of the roar of the thunder and the pouring rain, the storehouse stood there ominously. With its closed shutter still covered in blood-like creepy substance, it swallowed up all the bodies of the 6. To Natsui, putting the new lock on wasn't mainly preserving the scene for the police. She might have felt like she wanted to shut that mouth for all eternity, to prevent that eerie beast from swallowing up any more victims. Come on, let's go, everyone. Dr. Nanjo, thank you very much for your work. Genji, hurry up and contact the police. I will do so as soon as I return. The adults left the storehouse. The ghastly magic circle, drawn on the shutter, kept the 6 bodies in its throat, looming eerily as the lightning occasionally lit it up. All that could be heard was the sound of the rain, and the voices from the kids' TV program Maria was watching, and the engrossed Maria's cackling voice. In other words, what greeted them as they returned dumbfounded from that horrible, bizarre scene was the voice of Maria. She rolled around laughing at the TV. Those who returned to the room didn't know how to explain to Maria that her mother was dead and were trapped by a suffocating silence. At first, Maria returned their stares with a dubious look, but when she realized they weren't trying to blame her for anything, she ignored them and again immersed herself in the TV program. The children wordlessly sat down heavily on the sofa. The children wordlessly sat down heavily on the sofa. Their minds were probably blank from their state of shock. Everyone had already cried and mourned so much, but now they just vaguely sat there, their faces seeming to have lost all emotion. Only Cannon had returned to his usual calm expression. However, that probably didn't mean he'd be able to wipe out the shock. Nothing was reflected in his eyes as he stared into the empty space. Hideyoshi kept on fidgeting, and every time he remembered that horrible scene, he started muttering about how he couldn't believe it, how it couldn't have been something from this world, how it must have been the work of demons. Every now and then his mutterings produced a question directed at Nanjo, but the latter kept repeating in a calm, doctor-like manner that nothing could be understood by only glancing at the scene, and that until the police arrived they wouldn't learn anything. However, Nanjo only appeared calm next to Hideyoshi, who simply couldn't suppress his agitation and fear. In fact, Nanjo had also received a huge shock, and his face was a deathly pale. Maybe that atmosphere was why she tried to rise to the challenge and take charge. Natsui appeared to be unchanged in her normal attitude, and she briskly gave directions. "I will go see father. Genji, quickly contact the police." "Certainly. I wonder if you would allow me to tag along, Natsui-ne-san, since Kraus-ni-san is gone now. The task of aiding father has been left to me. It would be improper of me to relax while relying entirely upon you." Natsui was struck speechless by Ava's aggressive move in a situation like this. She seemed to be claiming that with Kraus dead, the one to take responsibility shouldn't be his wife, but herself, the next highly ranked in the family. Well, here's the problem with that. It's not like you're saying you're the most highly ranked sibling when all of your other siblings are dead. Like, I feel like you should be in a little bit more shock given the fact that you are now an only child. Or maybe she hadn't been at all happy when Natsui took command without reference to her in such an extreme situation. However, even Ava's mind had been blank from the shock until a moment ago. She only came to her senses after Natsui started giving orders. "Just do as you like." Natsui started walking without saying a word more. Ava followed behind her. As they did, Kumasawa-san ran into the parlor. She usually wasn't the kind of person to run around, so under normal circumstances, most people would have taken her entrance as a sign that something was the matter, but because everyone was still stricken with shock, they hardly even noticed her. Madam! If you're looking for Natsui-ne-san, she went to see father. She'll probably be back soon." "What happened, Kumasawa-san?" "You see, in the dining hall there was blood. Blood." The ears of everyone in the parlor twitched. Everyone thought the same thing. "I hope I misheard that. Any container can only hold so much, and no one here would be capable of handling yet another tragedy. And they all thought it. I hope I misheard that. What happened in the dining hall?" "When I went to the dining hall to set up for breakfast?" The first one to start running was George. His harsh footsteps jogged Hideyoshi and Nanjo to their senses, and they chased after him. Battler and the others followed. They flew into the dining hall one after another, but they didn't find any change that might have caused Kumasawa-san to go pale. To those who had viewed the gruesome scene in the storehouse, it was a bit of an anticlimax. However, Kumasawa-san, who followed them, pointed it out. There really was some traces of blood remaining on the floor. Compared to that terrible scene, it wasn't very impressive. However, if you calmly thought about it, this definitely indicated the loss of a lot of blood. "There's another puddle over here." "What in the world?" "It appears that a great deal of time has passed. It's probably safe to say they were killed here last night." It definitely looks that way. We were talking together in the dining hall until late into the night. After that, someone must have forced their way in." "Dad, when did you and Mom slip out of the meeting and go to sleep?" It was a little past midnight. So we should probably assume it happened after that. Are you kidding me? Give me a break. Milady, please stay strong. After seeing that hell on earth in the storehouse, this is nothing. Really, good for you. I feel like my head's gonna explode. This is the dining hall, right? Every day this is where I eat, complain about school, complain about homework, talk to my dad about my grades. That's what this place is to me. Milady, it wouldn't be good to remain here any longer. Let's return to the parlor. I agree. Uncle Hideyoshi, I think this room will be really important to the police. Don't you think it'd be bad if we trampled all over it? Battler proposed this in a slightly firm voice as, along with Cannon, he grabbed the pail and shaking Jessica's shoulders. Everything is just as Battler-san has said. There is nothing more to be gained from remaining in this room. Nanjo spoke while looking at everyone's pale faces. Even though that horrible scene in the storehouse felt like something not of this world, at least then we'd be able to leave, to cut ourselves off from that place and run away. Everyone had shared in that feeling. However, this dining hall was different. It was in the mansion, the main building on this estate, and as Jessica had said, it should have been one of the most calming places even inside the mansion. It was where all the relatives had eaten lunch and dinner yesterday. The shock of seeing this place smeared with blood reminded us of the horrible spectacle in the storehouse, and forced us to accept that we hadn't really been able to run away from that scene of the tragedy. I agree too. The culprit might have left traces in this room. Amateurs like us shouldn't stir the place up. Let's leave quickly. Quickly. Hideyoshi also understood the meaning of what Battler had said and pushed everyone to hurry out of the dining hall. That way, the way we were then looking at that blood any longer would have been too harsh. Nobody went against his words. Everyone raced each other out of the dining hall. It was almost as though the last person in the room would be trapped in there all alone. Once in the hallway, we lent a hand to Kumasawa-san, who was still trembling and leaning against the wall, and we all headed back to the parlor together. Then Genji returned. Oh, Genji-san, were you able to contact the police? As to that, I'm afraid I must apologize. I don't know if it was the failure of the radio or something else that caused it, but... What the... So you couldn't contact the police? Both the phone and the radio failed? My apologies. A boat will be arriving on Monday morning, and I believe we'll be able to borrow their communications equipment. Isn't there a boat on this island? Can't we just take a little trip out to the Nijima Police Department? Hideyoshi-san, that would be impossible with this weather. At the very least, we can't do anything until the typhoon passes us by. Kraus-sama's boat is being repaired and is not on the island. Therefore, we must await for the boat coming on Monday. How could this happen? 6 people are dead. The phones and radios aren't working, and there's no boat? So until the typhoon passes and the boat comes, in other words, until tomorrow morning, we're going to be stuck here on this island and we'll contact the police, aren't we? Which means that not just us, but the criminal who killed everyone is also confined to this island. That certainly follows. The culprit who killed everyone is still here on the island. So that bastard who killed Dad and the others must still be hiding somewhere, unable to escape? Damn it. I'll catch that bastard. No way I'll hand him over to the police. I'll slice him to bits myself. Hey guys, Maria's out of the loop. Who's going to explain? Maria had finally realized that something odd was happening in the parlor. Rather than noticing something odd, it was probably better to say she felt unhappy and neglected since everyone was getting so excited about something only she didn't know about. Ooh! Jessica Oni-chan, did someone die? The way she spoke was completely calm. Just as though she was talking about someone who had appeared on a television drama, as though it was someone else's problem. Jessica probably didn't like that. As though trying to say, "Can't you tell just by looking at me how overwhelmed with grief?" she flared up at Maria. "They all died. Everyone. My dad and Battler's parents, Goda-san, Shannon, and even your mother, too." "Stop it, Jessica-chan. You aren't the only one who's sad." "Maria-san, I know this will come as a shock, but please listen. Your mother has died." "Mama died?" "Ooh?" "Yeah, someone killed her. I know it's sad, but stay strong." "How many people died?" 6 people. 6 people. Damn it. How could anyone do something that cruel? There's a limit to how cruel you can be if you're a human. I don't know who it is, but the culprit isn't human. There's no way their blood is red." "Ooh, the culprit isn't human. It's just the... chosen by the... Huh? Hey, Maria? Did you say something just now?" Maria had just said something, but since the words are so remotely separated from the flow and the context of the conversation, I couldn't understand them for a second. When I tried to ask her to repeat it again, I was shocked by the sudden sound of Aunt Natsui's loud voice coming from the entrance to the parlor. It looked like Aunt Natsui and Aunt Ava had returned from their trip to see grandfather. "You can't contact them, even with the radio. If we can't use it at a time like this, why do we even have an emergency radio?" "My apologies. It was supposed to have a maintenance inspection every year." "Wait, don't you have one of those boat signaling devices that makes a flashing light? Couldn't you use that to contact the next island?" "We do not have such equipment. My sincere apologies." Just then Kumasawa arrived, pushing a serving cart loaded with breakfast. Since there was no way we'd be able to eat in the dining hall, Hideyoshi had ordered her to take it to the parlor. "Why are we eating breakfast here?" Natsui-san, I'll tell you later. More importantly, Ava, how was father?" "Judging by the fact that he is not with you, it seems he will not leave his room, not even for a situation like this. He wasn't there. The room was empty." "What the? Where could he have gone at a time like this?" "Do you mean to say the master has left his study?" "That is correct. I was surprised myself. I wonder when he left his room. Do any of you have an idea?" Natsui looked at Genji and Kanon as she said this. Maybe she was trying to ask whether the servants who served directly under the one-winged eagle knew of a place he might go. However, it was probably the other way around. Their faces made it clear that those who knew Kinzo best realized even more than the rest how impossible it was for him to leave his room. Even we have no idea. As you all know, within that study, the master had everything from a place to sleep and a bathroom. I couldn't imagine him leaving that room except for a significant reason. In that case, what? Isn't it natural to assume that one of those significant reasons came up? We still cannot be certain that that's the case. Anyway, he is a fickle person, so it's possible he went for a walk by himself, unaware of the current situation. If that is the case, then we must act in haste to tell him what has happened and ask for instructions. That's right. Although I don't want to think about it, it's possible something has happened to him, isn't it? I'd rather not even consider such a sinister possibility. No one had seen Kinzo since the discovery of those 6 terrible corpses. On top of that, the phones are broken and the radio wouldn't reach anyone, and there was no way to contact the police. Apparently the typhoon would leave tomorrow and a boat would come. But until then, no one could rely on anyone outside the island, nor could they escape the island. The tragedy hit everyone so abruptly that they'd lost all of their composure. Everyone felt a heavy silence, everyone was impatient. Even though they needed to do something, they couldn't think of anything. So some of them held their heads in their arms, while others got irritated. Right now, no one could explain what was occurring on the island Rakanjima. After that, we ate the breakfast Kumasawa-san had made, which felt dry and tasteless. Of course, this was right after something like that had happened. No one felt particularly hungry. However, we understood logically that not eating would weaken our bodies. It would also be rude to Kumasawa-san, who had made the breakfast. Kumasawa-san had taken some unusual Western vegetables, ones that Goto-san had probably ordered for his ultra-elaborate meals, and cooked them in a Japanese style, which makes them turn an unpleasant color. As to what Goto-san had been planning to cook with those ingredients, right then, I couldn't even imagine it. If I did think about it, I'd be reminded of the way Goto-san died, and a sour taste to fill the inside of my mouth. Everyone pretended to eat for the time being, but of course no one made much progress. Then we began pooling our knowledge about their current situation. First off, 6 people, which included Uncle Kraus, my dad, Kairi-san, Aunt Rosa, Goto-san, and Shannon-chan, have been found in the Rose Garden storehouse as brutally mutilated corpses. And yet we still couldn't contact the police since both the phones and the radios were unusable. So until the typhoon passed, there was nothing we could do. Furthermore, Grandfather, who might have hoped would be able to show a little leadership in this kind of a situation, had disappeared some time ago. Goto-san hadn't made breakfast, so Grandfather's stomach must have been empty, and if he had been taking just a casual walk, he should be able to hear him whining about how hungry he was by now, and despite that he hadn't appeared. There was more than a small chance that he had been caught up in this crime. According to my aunts, on their way back from Kenzo's study, they'd searched for him, calling out on every floor, but were unable to find him. Considering the timing of it all, it was only reasonable to assume that this disappearance had something to do with the crime. We figured Dad and the rest were probably killed in the dining hall and then painstakingly moved to the storehouse, so maybe Grandfather has already been killed and dragged to some strange place which we simply haven't discovered yet. No one actually said it out loud, but this theory seemed extremely convincing. We will go check that all the windows and doors are locked. We must also conduct a thorough search for Father. The children must remain in this room. Ava-san, Hideyoshi-san, I'm sorry, but please stay here with the children. I'd like to ask you the same, Dr. Nanjo. I understand. I will wait here. Aunt Natsui followed the servants, Genji-san, Kumasawa-san, and Kanako out of the parlor. All that was left was Uncle Hideyoshi, Dr. Nanjo, and the 4 of us children, and a total of 7 people. Let's all stick together and maybe watch some television while we wait. Though I doubt we'll find anything good in the middle of the day on a Sunday. Probably The Price is Right. I can't think of anything else that would have been on a Sunday. Uncle Hideyoshi started acting cheerfully, trying to brighten up this gloomy atmosphere. Ooh, good show. Watch it, watch it. Ooh. Oh, really? You know, you're not really reacting much for someone... Oh, yeah. Okay. You want to watch TV, Maria-chan? Then come and watch it with your uncle. Maria was the only one who joined in. Even though Maria had been told of her mother's death, she didn't show the slightest flicker in her emotions. Was it really normal for a 9-year-old girl like Maria to act so much like a very young child? Everyone else's mood failed to improve, and they each sank absent-mindedly into their sofas. Aniki, can I ask you something? What is it? Just now in the storehouse, you said something about Shannon-chan and a ring. Did you give that to her? George Aniki didn't answer, but he hung his head and closed both of his eyes. There could be no clearer response. Quit it, Battler. Figure it out yourself. You're right. I shouldn't have asked. That's right. It was me. Last night, I proposed to her. That was when I gave her the ring. I told her that tomorrow she should put it on whatever finger she wanted as her answer. Haha, I guess it was a pretty pretentious thing to say. And that ring had been on the ring finger of Chan's left hand. Well, several years ago, Shannon-chan came to me asking for advice. About you, George Nissan. I wonder what she could have said. Shannon was always really bad at lying. It was obvious pretty quickly that you were the one she was talking about. She asked whether it would be okay for her to get close to someone even though she was only a servant. She asked about what kinds of things boys like, what kind of clothes she should wear to make them happy. Lots of stuff like that. Well, I guess you could say I felt envious hearing her say that. So then she was given an engagement ring, and it all ended right there. Different people valued things differently, but being proposed to by a man, well, it could be the high point of your life. So last night I'm sure Shannon was happy from the bottom of her heart, happier than she's ever been since the day of her birth. George Nikki sighed deeply without raising his head, or maybe tears had risen to his eyes. It seems Shannon was on duty in the guest house last night, but because she was too embarrassed to go back to the guest house with me, she went over to the mansion. Think about how Shannon must have felt when you receive an engagement ring that, no matter how much warning you've been given beforehand, it's perfectly normal to get so excited that your mind goes blank. She must have been incredibly embarrassed. And then Shannon went to the mansion even though she hadn't been assigned there, helped go to Saw's work, and got caught up in this crime. If only I hadn't given her that ring on that day, in that place, Shannon wouldn't have Saya wouldn't have been caught up in the crime. Aniki, that's the one place where you're wrong. It's definitely wrong, so don't cry anymore. Battler-kun, let's leave him be. Aunt Ava said that. After Aunt Ava... Do you guys say aunt or aunt? After Aunt Ava said that, I stopped talking to him. Misplaced words of comfort might actually do more harm than good. Jessica sat down next to Aniki and put an arm around him. Maybe only Jessica, who had known about Aniki and Shannon's love since the beginning, and who had even discussed that relationship with Shannon, could comfort Aniki now. I went over to Aunt Ava and sat down on the opposite sofa. Battler-kun, you really are strong. It looks like you've kept a good hold on yourself. Well, look, the depth of the love becomes the depth of the wound, right? After all, it's not like how that old bastard died had anything to do with me. I feel bad about Kairi-san, but, well, she wasn't actually my parent. My, if that's so, you certainly were crying a lot back then. Well, I did think at least that much crying was due as gratitude to the parent who raised me. Heh. The speed of that changeover and that dry tone must have come from Rudolph. That kid would always get violently happy, sad, and angry. But he'd always regain his cool immediately afterward. It's nothing like that. I haven't really been able to get over the shock yet. I think the only difference between me and everyone else is the kinds of emotions it stirred in me. What do you mean? I've been acting much calmer than George, Nikki, and Jessica. That wasn't because my sadness was any less intense, or because I've already recovered. My sadness was simply getting replaced gradually with a different emotion. Rather than sad, I'd say I'm more pissed off. What bastard did this and where? It's kind of been eating at me that I didn't get a chance to smack him upside the face. That was what I really wanted to do. I couldn't forgive myself if I just sat there overwhelmed with sadness and hugging my knees. Since the time Dad and the others were killed, the island has been covered by the typhoon, which means the bastard responsible for all this is somewhere on this island. Yes, that would seem to be the case. I wonder if they're hiding somewhere in that dark forest, even now. I felt like I'd had a very similar conversation with Kairi-san the night before. That's right. After the letter from the person claimed to be Beatrice appeared at the dinner table last night, we talked about whether or not a 19th person actually exists. Aunt Ava, do you think this murder has anything to do with the letter from Beatrice last night? Ah, that one. Well, I wonder. All of the siblings agreed that the mysterious letter was sent to further complicate the problem of father's inheritance. As to whether or not the case this morning is related is impossible to tell at this stage. Was the letter really given to Maria by some witch called Beatrice? How could it be? All of it was a farce devised to father, wasn't it? He made Shannon-chan or someone wear the dress for the portrait, and trick Maria-chan, right? Isn't that just the kind of overly intricate prank father would pull? Last night I talked with Kairi-san about whether Beatrice actually exists, and Kairi-san also said that Beatrice was probably one of us 18 of us. Isn't that obvious? There's no one else on the island besides us, right? Then there must be someone amongst us who's pretending to be Beatrice. There's no one else but us on the island, you think? Obviously, right? Are you saying there could be someone else here other than us? No one is on this island except us. It's a big island. There are only 18 people. So, the one pretending Beatrice has to be one of those 18. Kairi-san denied the existence of a 19th person by spinning the chessboard around. Even though Aunt Ava hadn't constructed an argument that complicated, her opinion at least was the same. Except, if that's the case, our situation starts to look very ugly. At the time of Beatrice's letter, the whole thing could be passed off as a prank set up by someone or another. However, if we're assuming that there's no 19th person, we can't ignore this anymore. In other words, if there is no 19th person, then the culprit who killed Dad and the others is one of the 18, right? So in other words, the person who killed them is one of the people inside the very mansion right now. Aunt Ava smiled meaningfully. It looked like she thought this conclusion should have been obvious from the beginning. Yeah, but I'm still pretty sure there is a 19th. Either way, it means that the culprit is somewhere nearby. The culprit carried the bodies of those 6 into the storehouse. Here's the thing, if there is no 19th, then we have to assume it has to be someone who could dress up and look like Beatrice, or at least get Maria to go along with a lie, and have the physical ability to move fucking 6 dead bodies. In the other regard, if we can argue that there is indeed a 19th person, well, if there's a 19th person, who's to say they're alone? And they might have additional accomplices. But even that was an impressive feat, don't you think? The shutter is always closed and locked, right? In other words, in order to carry them into the storehouse, the culprit would need to unlock the shutter. Understand? Is it possible the shutter was left open by mistake that day? The servant said it's always kept locked. In other words, unless the culprit took the keys from the servant room, there's no way they could have opened the storehouse. I wonder if the key in the servant room was the only one. Genji-san said that was the case, which means that the culprit knew where that single key was kept and took it. Just now I watched when Canon-kun returned the key to the servant room. The wall was packed with keys, and I don't think a novice would know where or what those keys went to. The culprit was miraculously able to find the storehouse key amongst all those. I mean, they might have made a fake key ahead of time. They might... Heck, they might even know what brand padlock it is and had a master key for it. Furthermore, even though the key didn't have a tag or anything sticking to it, they knew it was the key to the storehouse behind the rose garden. And that means they also knew where the storehouse was. I'll say it even clearer. The culprit knew the inside of the servant room well. Her argument was extremely plain and clear. If the bodies had been found thrown somewhere in the bushes of the rose garden, there wouldn't have been much to go on. However, if there was only one key to the storehouse in the servant room, and it was stored with such a large group of keys, a novice would not be able to tell them apart. This meant the culprit was someone who went into the servant room a lot and was familiar with the locations of the keys. The family members didn't normally go into the servant room, which meant that one of the servants is the culprit. I'm sorry, but even I can't tell you any more than that. However, I'll tell you one thing. What's that? It's reasonable to think that the culprits are multiple in number and fairly well armed. They'd have to be, wouldn't they? They had to assault the 4 in the dining hall and kill them and drag them out a total of 6 bodies, all the way to the storehouse beyond the rose garden and arrange the disgusting makeup and the graffiti on the shutter. And there's no way the single culprit could carry out all of that on their own, right? It made sense. It probably would have been possible for a single person with enough time, but it would take so incredibly long. It was probably safe to assume that a significant number of people were involved. Phew. So what you're saying is, please keep it quiet, okay? Oh. People are read it out because they're dead. So that maybe all the servants were in cahoots. Oh, damn. That was unexpected. And he's grayed out because he's missing. Huh. It wouldn't be right to voice mere speculation like this. And if it really is true, what would you do next? They might not let us leave here alive. This is an opponent who had no trouble killing Isan and the 3 others. Right now, the only ones I can count on to fight with me are the 3 in my family, and maybe you, which comes to a total of 4 people, right? We're no better off than they were last night, and sure to be easy for the culprits to massacre the rest of us. I had been playing detective with Aunt Ava, trying to expose the person who had killed Dad and the rest of the people before the police did. If only I could cleverly penetrate the culprit's identity and stick the proof in their face. I had been so sure that just like one of the detective movies, the culprit would then give up and surrender. However, the culprit would only surrender if there was no way for them to fight back. The culprits behind the crime on the island were far from helpless and might even be able to massacre all the remaining people here. And on top of that, this island was like a giant closed room, cut off from the outside world by the typhoon. So they had a full day until tomorrow to kill, scheme, and camouflage themselves. In short, it wasn't a safe atmosphere where we could get very far by playing detective. To the contrary, we were at a stage where we had to be scared stiff, since playing detective might displease the culprits, and cause them to commit another mass murder. Well, it is just a possibility, right? But I can't bring myself to trust the servants yet, and that doesn't mean I only suspect them. Don't you think there might be some mastermind behind all this? A mastermind? Why do you say that? It's just a feeling. Think about what the word servant literally means. It means someone who serves as someone else's arms and legs, right? It was a bunch of ushiromiya family members who got killed, so naturally there must be someone involved who stands to gain from that result. This was also plain and clear. The Ushiromiya family had been right in the middle of the discussion about how to distribute the inheritance when grandfather died. If this case followed the standard form of any classic mystery novel, the crime was definitely caused with someone with ties to the Ushiromiya family and who was involved in the inheritance problem. Aunt Ava was probably read a few books in that genre herself. Her argument may have had a few blind assumptions in it, but it was a standard conclusion that anyone might have reached. I think most people would end up suspecting the servants, even if they used different reasoning to get there. Especially the story about the key to the shutter. Again, guys, I think you're putting too much importance in this padlock. If somebody's been planning this, obviously if they're here at this time, it's not like this is a crime of fucking passion. They had to be planning this ahead of time. So they've had months, if not longer, to get this stuff ready. They could have made a fake key. There's no reason why they had to get the key out of the servants' room. They could already have their own fake key. They could have had a master key. Hey, they could have ordered a spare key from the padlock manufacturer. They could just be good at lock picking. It's a padlock. It's not that hard to do. Granted, I don't know that skill set, but I'm just saying. It's definitely not that hard in video games. Okay, all joking aside, I'm just saying, if somebody has the mindset that they're going to fucking murder people, I'm pretty sure at that point they're going to set aside the time to learn how to lockpick. That made it very easy to suspect that one of the servants was involved. And that's why I don't like it. What do you mean you don't like it? Nah, just talking to myself. I tried to dodge her question by joking, but I couldn't erase the sense of unease welling up inside me. After all, her conclusion was such an easy one to reach. A conclusion that anyone could reach. And I just couldn't be satisfied with that. If I tried spinning the chessboard around, like I'd learned from Kairi-san, this was exactly why a servant couldn't possibly be the culprit. If the servants really were the culprits, they wouldn't hide the bodies in a place connected to themselves. Why on earth would they use the rose garden shed if they were the ones in charge of the key that could unlock it? The police would probably immediately pursue whoever had been in control of the key. It was even possible that some other facts might come to light as well. The more we think about the servants as the culprit, the less reason they had to carry the bodies into the storehouse. But what if they knew we'd think that, and they put the corpse in the storehouse for that very reason? No, that's completely impossible. When the police come and inspect the scene of the crime, they'll probably be able to uncover many things. No matter how carefully the culprits carried out the murder, some traces will definitely be found. In other words, they had everything to lose and nothing to gain. If you think about it in this way, and look at the murder from the culprit's side, it's hard to imagine why they'd want to call attention to the corpses. Once the corpses are found, it could result in someone sending a report to the police, or it might make the remaining people more cautious, or it might make the survivors start to research the culprit. None of these things would make life any easier for the culprit. It's just like the words the main character's mother in a novel I read recently called Higurashi no Nako Koro ni. Every story needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Eliminating that beginning is an essential for the perfect crime. Right now, we don't know where Grandfather is. We don't know if he's already become a victim or if he's one of the culprits. But this state of confusion must be beneficial to the killer. The culprit has absolutely nothing to gain by showing us the bodies in such an obvious way and making us all realize there's been a murder. In fact, this is the perfect place to spin the chessboard around. In other words, showing us the corpses in such a flashy way must be the culprit's goal in and of itself. So, at the very least, to the culprit, the appearance of the 6 corpses, they're meant more than the deaths themselves. In other words, the culprit wanted this murder on display. To whom? To us? This is a message. The culprit's trying to shove something in our faces. I don't know what it is. At this point in time, the vulgar mass murder isn't making me feel anything except a malice directed towards all of us. Malice towards all of us, is it? Each one of the survivors has some kind of connection to one of the 6 victims. Uncle Krause's death brought Jessica the grief of losing a family member. The deaths of Dad and Kairi-san brought me sorrow, while Aunt Rose's death brought Maria sorrow. Goda-san's death probably shocked his fellow servants, and Shan and Shanta brought grief to George Nikki, who had proposed to her, and to Kanon-kun, who had loved her like an older sister. Everyone now on this island has received an equal amount of sadness. Aunt Ava, sure that the servants were in cahoots, but then how could you explain the deaths of Goda-san and Shan? At any rate, by this argument, the grief caused by the 6 deaths hit everyone but Aunt Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi. Even Aunt Ava, who had directed suspicion at the servants, and that though she herself was beyond suspicion, could not be ruled out as a suspect. In the first place, she was able to argue that the servants were suspicious by focusing on the shutter's key. But if you look at it from the perspective of motive and who would gain, Aunt Ava's name rises to the top of the list. I know what you're thinking, Battler-kun. Huh? Oh no, please don't tell anybody about how my head's so full of obscene stuff. I like the music. I'm the one who's going to gain the most from these murders. Since I'm going to be suspected anyway, I might as well get it out in the open. I tried to dodge the issue by joking around, but apparently it didn't work. The inheritance will be divided into as many parts as there are siblings, but right now I'm the only one of the 4 left. All of the assets of the Ushiromiya family will become mine. If Uncle Hideyoshi heard you, he'd say, "Could you give it a rest? It's not funny." I'm sorry. I was just fooling around since I'm going to be suspected anyway, no matter how much I try to smooth it over. That's why, from my point of view, this murder might have been designed to cast suspicion upon me. Unfortunately, my alibi for last night is weak. Could you tell me a bit more about last night? As you know, the discussion between the siblings and of how to slice up and eat the inheritance continued until last night, late in the night, but I don't know how late it lasted. My husband and I had woken up early the morning. We were so sleepy, and a little past midnight they let us go. We then returned to the guest house and rested there. You returned to the guest house? Can anyone other than Uncle Hideyoshi prove that? No, wait. It's not like I suspect you or anything, okay? Oh, are you sure about that? Giggle. I don't know if it counts as proof, but when we returned to the guest house, we were greeted by Genji-san, who asked if we needed a towel. I think that should be enough to prove we returned to the guest house a little after midnight. Though if my theory was correct, the servants would all be in coots, and that wouldn't actually make for much of an alibi. Hey, you've got a point there. Guess that means I'm playing detective with the real culprit right now, huh? However, let me say this for my honor's sake. If I was after the inheritance, I'd never commit such a bizarre set of murders. After all, if I just wanted to make them forfeit their rights to the inheritance, it wouldn't matter to me how they died. It'd be much smarter of me to try to make their deaths look like accidents, especially if you're assuming I laid out some careful plan that involved even the servants. You've got a point there. If you're killing someone for personal gain, you definitely shouldn't make it look like a murder. Exactly. That's why I'm in such a blue mood. The police will probably treat me like the mastermind and investigate all kinds of things. Not fun at all. Aunt Ava shrugged with a bitter smile. It was just as easy to suspect Aunt Ava as it was to suspect the servants. So if we spin the chessboard around, does that make it impossible for the culprit to be her, suspicious as she is? However, if that sort of argument always works, then motive can never help us in any way. No, that can't be right. Knowing the motive must give us powerful clues towards knowing the culprit. That's why murderers from all the time periods disguise crimes in complicated ways, cleverly preventing their motives from being discovered. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Every time I spin the chessboard around, it keeps flipping from the front to back and back to front. Are my thoughts bringing me closer to the truth, or are they? Aunt Ava didn't want to talk any more than that. So I folded my arms and headed to the window to cool my head a little. As I looked over the parlor, I saw George and Nikki and the others gathered, talking. It looked like they were talking about the magic circle that had been painted on the shutter. As Uncle Hideyoshi thought back to the time, he started drawing the shape in the margins of Maria's notebook. I see, since Maria was second only to grandfather in knowledge of the occult, she might understand what it meant. I think it was probably something like that. There was a mark that looked like the variation of a cross. And then, surrounding the circle and all the perimeter were the closely packed strange letters on all four sides, the cross and the four corners. There was something written. It didn't look like the alphabet or something like that. It was like what they call ancient characters. And around the top of the circumference there was a small mark. 5 small circles arranged at a plus sign, and a straight line connecting them. Oh yeah, there definitely was something like that drawn there. Yep, there's no mistake in that shape. I don't understand the thin characters, but the arrangement was nearly the same. Everyone was staring down at the shape, so I stared down at it too. From what I'd heard, This had been painted on the shutter of the storehouse with some material that looked like blood. I see, this sure is unsettling. Grandfather's probably the only one who'd want to draw something this weird. Seriously, where did he go? I want to grab him and ask him what the hell this is supposed to mean. Jessica's voice contained impatience and anger. She hadn't gone so far as to say Grandfather was the culprit, but she seemed sure that Grandfather knew something about the culprit's background. Of course, if you were searching for a link between connecting the Ushiromiya family to the occult, 10 out of 10 people would think of Grandfather. Also, to a person who knew nothing of the cult, this strange mark would have no meaning, which meant that this might have been something addressed to Grandfather. That's right, and the reason the crime was shown to the survivors was so they'd find this. In that case, where had Grandfather, the essential recipient of this message, disappeared off to? Does this shape ring any bells? Ooh, Maria looked at the shape with a serious face. Maybe she was enthusiastic because this was her area of expertise. However, her appearance was that of someone separated from the events at hand, as though this thing hadn't been drawn when the shutter closed around her mother's corpse. My first impression was the design resembled a German cross. Ah, it certainly does have that kind of design. Does that mean it has something to do with Germany? The German cross was originally a crest from the religious order of knights and was supposed to protect pilgrims traveling to sacred places. So in other words, this magic circle might have some religious meaning. This is starting to sound like gibberish. When I looked over at all of them preparing to jump into the discussion, something shocked me. Maria was smiling, an eerie and incomprehensible expression on her face. It was almost as if she was making fun of everyone's ignorance. It was an expression I wouldn't have dreamed to find on Maria's face, and she laughed. That eerie, jarring laugh was something I didn't want to believe was possible, even though I was looking at it right in front of my eyes. Your face is doing a thing. Maria, why is your face doing that? You people aren't even close. Can't you just tell by looking at it? While everyone was busy being scared out of their wits, Maria kept on cackling happily by herself. After a while, that laugh was suddenly and abruptly cut off, but her expression still looked like it belonged to someone completely different from Maria. This is the 7th magic circle of the sun. The characters are written in Hebrew. Give it here. Sure. Maria stole the writing materials from the stunned Hideyoshi's hand. She then started drawing another magic circle of a rustle right next to the one Hideyoshi had drawn. See? It looked sort of like this, right? Yes, it was. But Maria, incredible. You really do know a lot. Jessica tried to smooth things over by praising Maria. Maybe she wanted to confirm that this was still the Maria we all knew so well, but Maria didn't answer her in any particular way. In any way particular. Maria began swiftly writing unfamiliar characters in the corners of the shape. When Uncle Hideyoshi and the Dr. Nanjo saw them, their eyes immediately began to open wide. Written on the top and the bottom, and the left and the right, are the names of the angels who preside over wind, fire, earth, and water. Jason, Arrow, Flor, Lock, and Talia had. And the four corners are the names of the 4 great kings. Ariel, Seraph, Tharsis, and Cherub. Is that what you saw? Even if they hadn't been able to correctly write what they'd seen, when they were once again shown something identical, it was difficult for them to realize the two were the same. When Maria asked them whether it matched, Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Nanjo nodded over and over again. There's no mistake, that's it. I'm sure those are the characters that look like. How were you able to write something like that? There was also characters written around the circumference. I know. Like this, right? Maria quickly began to surround the circumference with more Hebrew writing. It's from Psalms of the Old Testament, the 16th and 17th verses of the 116th Psalm. Huh. I actually have a Bible right next to me. Granted, it's not in Hebrew. King James Version. But I also have a ton of writing where I've written notes and stuff in this. Okay, so 116 verses 16 and 17. O Lord, truly I am thy servant. I am thy servant and the son of thine handmaid. Though thou hast loosed my bonds, I will offer to thee the sacrifice of thanksgiving, and will call upon the name of the Lord. You must have at least read the Bible, right, Key? Acting as though knowing this was only common sense, Maria laughed. For a while, everyone, including me, was at a loss for words. A little later, George and Nikki returned to his senses and slowly managed to speak. That's incredible. I'm surprised. So, what meaning does this magical circle have? It's a magical circle to borrow the power of the sun. He who wears it as a talisman drawn in gold shall be able to break free from the bonds of any prison and receive the power to gain freedom. To break free from bonds and to gain freedom, it sounds deep. The word bonds is not limited to interpretation of some kind of physical object. Therefore, it does not only hold meaning for people locked up in an actual jail. It can also refer to the release from mental bonds such as ties of obligation and inescapable fate. Ties of obligation and inescapable fate, you say? That's also pretty deep. But I really don't understand. What does this have to do with the 6 bodies? Those 6 bodies, far from being released, they were killed and stuffed in a storehouse, weren't they? It's not like the magic circle was drawn for their sakes. The 6 of them were there for the sake of the magic circle. It is truly pitiable. Well, out of curiosity, again, I like the new art better. What do you mean? What in the world do you mean when you say the 6 of them are there for the sake of the magic circle? Maria lifted up her pointer finger and waggled it as if she were making fun of us. Well, that's written around the circumference. Curiosity. What if I go to this and then to this? Can't you read it? Psalms chapter 116, verses 16 and 17. I'll read it for you. The Lord has freed me from my chains. I'll offer to you the sacrifice of thanksgiving and will call on the name of the Lord. See? See, you say. I've got no idea what you're talking about. You're saying... You're saying they're human sacrifices. If what Maria had just read aloud was a vital part of the magic circle, then it was saying that the sacrifices had to be offered in order for this magical circle to be effective. So human sacrifices had been offered inside the storehouse where the magic circle had been drawn. A heartbeat later, everyone else seemed to reach the same conclusion. Some people were shocked, and others spat out that this was insane as they had punched their knees. This was starting to get incredibly disturbing, and we couldn't accept it or understand it. I don't care what kind of magic circles or curses other people believe in. I won't pick a fight with them. But did they really kill Dad and the rest as sacrifices for crap like that? I couldn't stand that feeling. Compared to this, I preferred it to when we were still discussed by the theory that the fight over the inheritance. As I started getting pissed off with a feeling between anger and sadness, I broke from the circle everyone was in and returned once again to the window. Something had gone insane since yesterday. There was that letter from the witch Beatrice that Maria had read aloud at last night's dinner. Ever since that point, it feels like like this whole mansion and this whole island have been getting more and more firmly locked inside some kind of bizarre world. That's right. When I think back on it, that letter was an invitation from the witch. The ruler of the nighttime island had invited us inhabitants of the daytime into another world. The phone and the radio had been interrupted, and the island was shut off from the typhoon. So you really could call this place another world cut off from the real one by now. Yeah, as this island is now, it's perfectly normal for a witch to send us letters and for human sacrifices to be offered up for the sake of magic circles. So what will happen next? Will some weird people wearing goat masks start doing the Bond Festival dance or something? It's hopeless, I don't get it. The inside of my head's all screwed up and I don't even know what to think. Anger, sadness, the opposing emotions all swirled together, and they started to suck me in. Unable to resist, I could do nothing but cover my eyes with my hands and trust my mind and my body as I started getting sucked in. As I started losing heart, I began to recall a memory from when I was small. It was from when I was very young. I had unfortunately seen a scary occult movie on TV, and for a while I hadn't even been able to go to the bathroom by myself. That old bastard gave an exaggerated laugh and said this: "Hey, Battler, why do you think they go to all the trouble to make movies like this about demons and the occult and such? It's because they don't exist. Something that ridiculous can't be found anywhere on the planet. Because they don't exist, people want to see them and go to a lot of effort in making them. That's why these occult movies just make me laugh. If I were forced to choose, I'd say rather than demons and monsters, this year's earnings call and angry wives are 1,000,000 times scarier. I'll go further, okay? From my point of view, getting scared is a recreational emotion, something for people who've got room to relax both in their hearts and their lifestyles. They had so much free time they didn't know what to do with it, so in order to entertain their mind with unusual emotions, people started creating a culture with demons and the occult and stuff. Seriously, why have I been acting so damn thick-headed? I was totally taken in. Don't try to mess with me, this is the human world. I don't give a damn about witches, demons, magic, circles, and sacrifices. The human who killed Dad and everyone else is still on the island. That's all there is to it, right?" The next person who started speaking to my heart was Kairi-san. You see, in both chess and shogi, when you reach the very, very last stage of the game and get closer and closer to cornering your opponent, the number of optimal moves you could possibly make gets smaller and smaller. Therefore, if you're backing someone against the wall, or if someone is doing the same to you, both players' moves become infinitely easier to read. In other words, when you're completely cornered and you think you have no more no moves left, that is the moment when it's easiest to read your opponent. However, when a person is forced into a defensive position, they can't help but lose their ability to think clearly, so they aren't able to get their minds around their opponent's moves. That's when you spin the chessboard around. With all my strength, I slapped my face with both hands. Now my eyes were truly open. When you don't understand anything and you are completely cornered just like I am now, isn't that the perfect time to spin the chessboard around? While on the defensive, we can't even guess at the culprit's scheme. If we spin it around and look at it that way, just what might we see? First off, at the time the culprit committed the murders, they knew the island was being cut off by the typhoon. Therefore, they should have understood that even if they carried out the murders, they wouldn't be able to get away early the next morning. In short, the culprit had begun without securing a way to escape. Furthermore, that bastard tossed the corpses in the storehouse. Then was even kind enough to say, "Here they are," with that weird bit of graffiti. In other words, since we'd probably find the corpses sooner or later, they wanted to show them to us. If we'd all been dim and hadn't noticed the storage shed, the culprit's goal would not have been achieved, would it? If you think about it this way, that bastard of a culprit, since this morning, they must have been watching our every move with bated breath. After all, if we hadn't been so kind as to discover what was on that storehouse, all of that hard work and preparation they did last night would have gone poof. What did the culprit want to make us feel by showing us the corpses in the storehouse? All 6 of the bodies had their faces noticeably destroyed. Was it a grudge? A warning? The defacement of the bodies had occurred after death, so it hadn't been the means by which the culprit had killed. It didn't mean anything to those who had been killed. It did have meaning to those who found the bodies. The culprit wanted to make it appear that they had been killed so brutally. Ha! After thinking this way, I really want to tell that bastard to stop taking me so lightly. Who just danced to that tune? If you're told, please be scared, you can't just say, really? Sure thing. When someone tells the great Ushiromiya battler, the entrance is right here, I'm the kind of guy who will start wanting to sneak in through the window. The next thing that had me concerned was the so-called magic circle on the shutter. As Maria, who had shown that her knowledge of the occult rivaled grandfathers, had recognized the magic circle was genuine. They must have drawn that thing in pitch black darkness, taking a lot of time and holding an umbrella in one hand. Is that the amount of hard work and perfectionism impressive? What purpose would have been worth all of that effort? If we were looking for a fan of the occult in this mansion, most like all of us would naturally suspect Grandfather. Did they want to make us think Grandfather was involved? But if that's all they wanted, they could have just drawn any old scribble that looked like a magic circle. It wasn't like any of us amateurs would be able to tell the difference between genuine and fake. However, this magic circle was genuine, and furthermore, it had even been written in Hebrew. So this magic circle had a message that could only be understood by someone with knowledge of the occult. A message in a form of communication is a form of communication. By sending it, they were hoping for a reaction. A reaction. For some reason, we couldn't find Grandfather now. I don't know how Grandfather might have spotted the magic circle on the shutter, but did he choose to hide himself in reaction to that? No, was it a trap to make us suspect Grandfather had participated? You could read it either way. Damn, that's annoying. What kind of reaction was the culprit hoping to get out of us by putting on this occult show? Somehow, that felt like the culprit's weak point. That letter from Beatrice that Maria had read aloud during last night's dinner sprang back into my mind. This was a freak who'd asked us to enjoy a battle of the wits. Isn't that interesting? This is a battle of the wits between us and the witch. Will we be sucked up by her occult game first, or will we pull off her fake skin first? There's a whole day until the typhoon passes. Why not enjoy ourselves? I finally noticed that the inside of the parlor had gone quiet again. Everyone had sunk into their favorite sofas, some deep in thought, some irritated, some acting depressed. Maria was once again enjoying the TV as if she had never left it. It looked like she found some commercials more fun than the boring program, and she happily yelped, "Ooh, ooh, ooh," and giggled. I stared at each person's appearance in turn. If there isn't a 19th person, the culprit must be in this room. Right now Aunt Natsui's searching the mansion with the servants, right? Then we shouldn't say in this room. In this mansion is where the culprit has to be. After all, it's possible Aunt Natsui was behind this, and we still can't deny that one of the servants might be the killer. Anyone could be guilty. Still, Natsui and the rest sure are taking their time. Of course, it's not a small mansion, but isn't this taking a little too long to just walk around checking the windows and doors? Just as I was thinking that Aunt Natsui and the rest returned. Not one of them was missing, but our relief was short-lived. Everyone looked at Aunt Natsui in shock. The talk I'd had with Aunt Ava started to creep back into my mind. The possibility the culprits had enough in numbers of weapons to kill all of those 6 at once. Forgive me if I've startled you. I mean, I understand that you definitely want a gun for self-defense. But you have to bear in mind that, say you need this gun because you're a little on edge. You might think for a second, the rest of us might also be just the tad bit on edge as well. I brought this to be prepared for the worst. After all, that thing in Aunt Natsui's hand was a rifle. At a glance, its silhouette looked a lot like a hunting gun, but it was unusually short and kind of looked like a kid-sized weapon. However, it had a weightiness to it that made it clear it was no kid's toy. That gun is Kinzo-san's, isn't it? Did you know about it? That's right. I remembered it when I was in Father's old collection, and I managed to find it. Whoa! Awesome! Natsui-san, is that thing real? Yes, it's real. It can fire live ammunition. Long ago, Father used it to scare away wild birds. Ah, that takes me back. Where did you find that thing? No matter how much I asked him to let me touch it, he'd never let me even lay one finger on it. Oh, Grandfather had one of these? I didn't know that. Long ago, Grandfather was really addicted to cowboy films. That generation really liked this kind of rifle. Is that a Winchester? But I've never seen one that short before. Ah, I remember. It's that gun. That really takes me back. That's the one the Steam McQueen fired off and wanted alive or dead. Father sure has good taste. It is an item a master ordered specially from America long ago. As you can see, it is a working gun, so please don't tell anyone about this, because Japan has weird rules about guns for some reason. He was quite fond of it right after he managed to acquire it. It seems the workings that ejected the cartridges were more interested in him than shooting it, and he played around with it back in the forest all the time. Ho 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 ho. Still, it's rather disturbing. Are you sure you should be dragging this out? This is to prepare for the worst. There was probably more than one offender involved. Furthermore, those horrible people killed 6 of us, including my husband. I have a responsibility to protect everyone until tomorrow in my husband's place. As Natsui-san said this, she slumped down into one of the sofas and took a deep breath. She had been trying to find Grandfather as well as check the doors and windows. Since Grandfather wasn't with her, she probably still didn't know where he was. I carefully checked all of the doors and windows throughout the mansion. However, we must be prepared for anything. Everyone, I think it would be best if we all remained here. Oh, good point. If everyone gathered here, then we can all feel more secure by keeping an eye on each other. What do you mean by that, Ava-san? Nothing, really. I'm just agreeing with your opinion, aren't I? There was a stormy atmosphere between the two of them. If you think about it, who was the most suspicious from the inheritance problem standpoint? Aunt Ava was the obvious answer. However, there was no proof that Aunt Natsui was innocent. No, if you view Beatrice's letter as one of the grandfather's complicated pranks and think of this as a crime as just an extension of that, there's more than enough reason to suspect even Grandfather. Also, Aunt Natsui thought the criminal was on the outside, but Aunt Ava thought the criminal was on the inside. In short, it was the question of whether or not a 19th person exists. That same question has been repeated endlessly since last night's dinner, with the letter from the witch who called herself Beatrice. So, was the culprit among us or not? And did the witch Beatrice exist or not? If you assume that something as stupid as a witch can't exist, you are basically saying that one of these relatives here who share a common bloodline is the culprit. If that was too unpleasant, it'd be much more comfortable to simply accept the fairy tale like character of the witch. A witch drawing a bizarre magic circle and offering human sacrifices. If I could accept that rubbish, I'd be able to trust all of the people in this room. However, damn common sense got in the way. It kept repeating that witches don't exist. In that case, the culprit must be among us. In the middle of the seemingly endless rain, none of us could break the silence. I should probably go to bed at some point. We'll read a tiny bit more. I keep saying I'll make shorter videos. I need to probably try to do that. Lunch ended and the servants removed the tableware and went to the kitchen. The wind and the rain neither Neither or neither, weakened nor strengthened, and the island remained cut off from the outside world. At first it seemed to those Natsui's plan to stop anyone from taking a step outside the room. But when it came to the time to prepare for lunch, she finally realized this would be impossible. However, in order to avoid having anyone alone in the kitchen, she told the 3 servants to go together. Because of that, the servants were the first ones given the right to leave the stuffy parlor, which had been packed with 11 people. Since breakfast had immediately followed that terrible incident, preventing most of us from eating much, everyone tore into their lunches in silence. I will wash the dishes so you can rest a while. Kanen-kun and Genji-san, do you want something to drink? I don't need anything. Kanen? I don't need anything either. You two must have been so busy and so early in the morning. It's no wonder you're worn out. The only noise was that of Kumasawa washing the dishes, which resounded throughout the kitchen. Genji and Kanen sat in some chairs a short distance away, their eyes lightly closed. Just as Kumasawa-san had said, those two had probably built up a great deal of fatigue, but that didn't mean they could let it show in front of the relatives. Avoiding that was one of their virtues. After the silence had continued for some time, Kanen opened his mouth and muttered, Shannon. Why did she have to die in such a horrible way? Forget about the manner of her death. It was nothing more than bad luck. You're right. It was nothing more than bad luck. They both fell silent once again. Kanen's expression was filled with grief. To think that Shannon-chan's actually dead. I still can't believe it. Poor thing. Not being able to see her again feels like a lie. I just wanted to see her smiling face one more time. Kumasawa spoke with her back facing them. After all, Kumasawa hadn't seen Shannon's corpse, so she had no trouble mentioning Shannon's face. When Kanen heard those words, it reminded him again of how only half of Shannon's face had been left, and his grieving expression twisted even further. Why did Beatrice-sama do that to Shannon? If she wanted a sacrifice, there were plenty of others to choose from. Why? Why? It was nothing more than bad luck. If we were less lucky, you or I might have been lying out there instead of Shannon. Or it could have been someone else entirely. Everything is left to fate. Genji-sama? You said the door to Madame's room was stained with traces of something like blood, right? The same substance that was painted on the shutter. Indeed. It was an unsettling mark, almost as though someone with blood-stained fingers had been trying to pull out the doorknob. No scratch through the door. No scratch through the door. That sort of unpleasant mark. So does this mean Beatrice-sama came to visit Madame's room and tried to open the door, but couldn't? Genji thought back to the time he had seen those traces of blood on the door to Natsui's room, with the substance sticking to the door around the doorknob, and the marks of something scratching against the door. It had definitely appeared as though someone had tried to open the door, but couldn't. How did the madam avoid being chosen as a sacrifice? If only she'd been chosen, Shannon wouldn't have had to die. Just then a loud, sharp noise came in from the hall. Both of them turned around, surprised. That's a pretty interesting chat you're having there. Let me join in too. Before any of the servants realized it, Battler was standing in the doorway to the kitchen. Battler-sama, how rude of us. Genji and Kanen-kun stood up surprised and hastily bowed, but I didn't care about stuff like that. I was more concerned with continuing their discussion. I told them I was going to go to the bathroom, so they let me go. I thought I'd suffocate if I was locked up in that room any longer. I was about to come ask you guys for some water, but then I overheard something pretty interesting. You don't need to bow your heads or anything. Please, let me hear the rest. That just now wasn't really... I've been listening to you for a while. Don't try to hide it now. So I'll ask directly. Who is this Beatrice? She's supposed to be a witch from a kid's story, but it doesn't look that way now. Kanen-kun averted his gaze. It was obvious that he didn't want to talk about this, which only made me want to ask even more. While making an effort to smile, I grabbed the collar of his shirt. Last night, this would have been none of my business. But after this morning, everything's changed. Now that Dad and the rest have been killed, this is totally my business. I have the right to listen to the suspicious story, don't I? I glared into Cannon's eyes as he continued to divert his gaze in apparent pain. Since there was a big difference in our heights, Cannon had to stand on his toes, and it looked like it hurt a bit. Battler-san, please let go of him. Cannon-san isn't really hiding anything. Then you won't have any problem talking about it, right? It's lonely being out of the loop, you know. When I tried to further twist up his collar, Genji-san cut between us and spoke. In his expression were faint traces that he'd made up his mind to do something. Apparently he had no intention of hiding it. I can tell you about it. Cannon only hesitated because you might have taken it badly, Battler-sama. Hesitating, huh? Not very manly of you. Whatever it is you're talking about, it's even more unpleasant having kept a secret. Tell me about it. It's not like we have anything better to do before tomorrow comes. A slightly spooky story might be the best way to avoid getting bored. Genji-san and Cannon-kun looked at each other, then nodded as though they decided to talk. Understood. Please ask us anything. We will talk. Right. Then I'll ask. Who in the world is Beatrice? Well, until next time, guys. Bye.